There is a feeling, a state of being, that our modern language struggles to name. It is not sadness, for which there are pills and therapies. It is not failure, for it often arrives when you have achieved everything you were told would make you happy. It is a quiet, hollowing ache, a silent hum of wrongness beneath the surface of a successful life. You may have the career, the family, the home, and yet, in the still moments of the night, you feel a profound sense of dislocation, as if you are a stranger in your own life. This is the threshold. This is the silent, unnerving invitation into what mystics and poets have long called the dark night of the soul. Our culture treats this experience as a malfunction, a problem to be solved, a bug in the system of relentless positivity. We are told to work harder, to consume more, to distract ourselves until the feeling goes away. But what if this darkness is not a malfunction? What if it is not an ending, but a sacred, necessary, and deeply transformative beginning? What if the emptiness you feel is not a void, but a space being cleared for something more true, more real, to finally take root? This journey, this passage through the shadows, is not a sign that you are broken. It is a sign that you are breaking open, and for this specific, delicate, and powerful human journey, there exists a map. It is not a religion you must adopt, nor a dogma you must believe. It is a science of the mind, a practical and compassionate set of tools, honed over thousands of years within the traditions of Buddhist wisdom. It is a guide, not to escape the darkness, but to walk through it with awareness, to find the hidden light within its depths, and to emerge on the other side, not just healed, but whole. This is an invitation to reframe your struggle, to see your pain not as a curse, but as the very catalyst for your deepest awakening. So you have heard the call. It does not come as a trumpet blast or a voice from the clouds. It arrives in a whisper, in the space between your thoughts when the distractions of the day finally fade. It is a resonance of emptiness in a full life, a question mark that hangs in the air after every achievement. We can call it the call from the abyss, not because it comes from a place of evil, but because it comes from a depth within you that you have not yet explored, a place profound and dark and vast. The first and most crucial thing to understand is what this call is, and what it is not. It is essential to distinguish this spiritual crisis from clinical depression. Depression is a serious medical condition, a debilitating weight that often flattens the emotional landscape into a gray and hopeless inertia, and it requires and deserves professional, compassionate medical care. If you feel that weight, please seek that help. The dark night of the soul, while sharing some shadows, is different in its texture and its purpose. It is not so much a flattening of feeling as it is a crisis of meaning. It is the raw, aching pain of a worldview that has become too small for your soul. It is the agony of shedding a skin you have outgrown. Imagine an architect. Let's call him Alex. For years, Alex has poured his life into his work. He designs magnificent buildings of glass and steel that scrape the sky, winning awards and the admiration of his peers. He has a beautiful apartment with a view of the city he has helped to shape. He has everything, but one evening, standing in the marble lobby of his latest creation, a building praised for its perfection, he feels nothing, not pride, not joy, not even satisfaction. Instead, he feels a chilling, hollow echo. The grand structure around him feels like an elaborate tomb, and he feels like a ghost within it. His suffering isn't a chemical imbalance in the brain. It is a spiritual starvation. The very foundation of his identity, Alex, the successful architect, has crumbled into dust, and he is left standing in the rubble, asking, is this all there is? This is the call from the abyss. It is the realization that the map you have been using to navigate your life has led you to a place that looks like the destination, but feels like a wasteland. This experience, this collapse, feels like a catastrophic failure. Our society certainly treats it as such, but seen through the lens of wisdom, it is the exact opposite. It is a profound sign of your readiness to awaken. The pain you feel is a spiritual growing pain, the old container of your ego, your beliefs, your ambitions, and your identity can no longer hold the truth of who you are. Your consciousness is expanding, and the old structures must break to accommodate the growth. It is not that you have failed life. It is that you have succeeded in outgrowing the narrow version of life you were sold. The seed is breaking through the soil, and this is a violent, disorienting, yet utterly necessary process. The call from the abyss is a signal that a deeper, more authentic part of you is demanding to be born. Alex's emptiness isn't a sign that he is a failure. It is a sign that the part of him that yearns for boundless peace can no longer be satisfied by the finite praise of building beautiful cages. No matter how gilded they are, his soul is asking for the sky, not just a view of it. To truly grasp the nature of this experience, we must gently introduce a new vocabulary, a more precise way of seeing. In the Buddhist tradition, a distinction is made between ordinary sadness and a deeper condition known as dukkha. Sadness is an emotional response to an event. You lose a job, a relationship ends, you feel sad. It is a clean, appropriate pain. It has a cause, and with time, it usually passes. Dukkha, however, is a much subtler and more pervasive state. It is often translated as suffering, but a better word might be unsatisfactoriness. It is the background static of anxiety in a silent room. It is the faint bitterness that underlies even the sweetest moments, born from the fear that they will end. It is the friction of existence itself, the stress of constantly striving, grasping, and resisting in a world that is fundamentally fluid and impermanent. Sadness is an occasional storm. Dukkha is the unstable barometric pressure of the entire climate of an unawakened mind. Alex's sadness would be the disappointment if a project were cancelled. His dukkha is the foundational, gnawing emptiness he feels even when the project is a wild success. It is this fundamental condition of dukkha that the dark night brings screaming into the foreground. The background static becomes a deafening roar. It forces you to finally stop and deal with the very nature of your existence. This is precisely where the wisdom of the Buddha offers not a belief system, but a diagnostic framework of incredible clarity and compassion. He was often called the Great Physician because he approached the human condition like a doctor. He offered a methodology known as the Four Noble Truths, which we can understand as a medical chart for the soul. The first truth is the diagnosis. It simply states, there is dukkha, there is suffering, there is unsatisfactoriness. This is not a pessimistic statement. It is a radical act of validation. It is the doctor looking at you with kind eyes and saying, I see your pain. It is real. You are not crazy for feeling this way. The call from the abyss, the emptiness Alex feels, is the universe giving you a personal, undeniable experience of this first noble truth. It is saying, listen, this feeling is real. It is time to pay attention, and this is the beginning of all true hope. A disease that is undiagnosed cannot be treated. By naming the fundamental condition, we take the first step toward healing it. The Buddha did not stop with the diagnosis. The second noble truth identifies the cause of the suffering. The third noble truth offers a prognosis. There is an end to suffering. A state of health is possible. And the fourth noble truth provides the prescription, the detailed path of treatment to achieve that cure. We will walk this path together, step by step, in the chapters to come. But for now, rest here. Rest in the profound validation of this first truth. The call you have heard from the abyss, the deep unease in your soul, is not a curse. It is not a punishment. It is a messenger, a guide dressed in shadows, who has come to tell you that the shallow life is no longer enough. It is the most important invitation you will ever receive. It is an invitation to turn around, to face the depths of your own being, and to begin the sacred journey home to a peace that does not depend on the shifting sands of the world, but on the unshakable bedrock of your own awakened heart. We have acknowledged the diagnosis. We have named the pervasive sense of unsatisfactoriness that haunts our lives. This dukkha, a doctor who only confirms your pain without seeking its cause, offers no path to wellness. The genius of the Buddha's method, the heart of this ancient science of mind, lies in its unflinching precision in identifying the source of the ailment. The second noble truth is this clear-eyed investigation. It asserts that our suffering is not random. It is not a punishment from an unseen force, nor is it an inherent flaw in the fabric of the cosmos. Our suffering, our dukkha, has a cause, and that cause resides within the workings of our own minds. The source code for our discontent is written in a language of three primal energies, three deep-seated patterns known as the three poisons. These are not sins to be judged, but habits to be understood. They are lobha, dosa, and moha, which we can translate as greed, aversion, and delusion. They are the engine of restlessness, the architects of our inner turmoil. Let's begin with the first poison, lobha, or greed. When we hear the word greed, we often think of a caricature, a miser counting his gold, but its true nature is far more subtle and intimate. It is the constant pull of desire, the relentless reaching for something outside of ourselves to make us feel complete. It is the mind's unending whisper of, "I need this to be happy." This isn't just about money or possessions. We are greedy for pleasant sensations, for the taste of good food, for the feeling of comfort. We are greedy for praise, for validation, for the fleeting high of a like on social media. We are greedy for experiences, for the next vacation, the next relationship, the next thrill. It is an inner state of leaning forward, a perpetual hunger for more. It is the energy of attachment, the belief that if we could just grasp and hold onto the right combination of people, things, and circumstances, we would finally arrive at a state of permanent satisfaction. But the very nature of this world is change. Sensations fade. Praise turns to criticism. People leave. And so, the greedy mind is condemned to a life of perpetual anxiety, forever chasing the next transient pleasure and fearing its inevitable departure. It is an exhausting, unwinnable game, a thirst that can never be quenched. The second poison is the mirror image of the first. It is dosa, or aversion. If greed is the pull, aversion is the push. It is the energy of resistance, the visceral no we say to life. It is the anger that flares up in traffic, the irritation at a colleague's incompetence, the frustration when things don't go our way. But like greed, its domain is vast and subtle. We feel aversion to unpleasant physical sensations, like pain or sickness. We feel aversion to difficult emotions, like fear, jealousy, or grief. We spend enormous amounts of energy trying to wall ourselves off from reality, pushing away anything that threatens our comfort or our ego. This resistance is a form of friction. Imagine trying to swim against a strong current. The struggle is not with the water itself, but with your resistance to its flow. In the same way, our suffering often comes not from the unpleasant event itself, but from our violent internal war against it. We are told we have a difficult diagnosis. The initial pain is real, but the aversion adds layers of suffering. This shouldn't be happening to me. I can't stand this. Why me? It is a clenching of the fist, a tightening of the heart against the unavoidable realities of life. Aversion, in all its forms, from minor irritation to deep-seated hatred, is a state of war with what is, and it is a war we can never win. These two poisons, the pulling of greed and the pushing of aversion, create a constant state of tension within us. But they do not arise from nothing. They are born from a deeper, more fundamental poison. This is moha, or delusion. Delusion, in this context, does not mean stupidity or a lack of information. You can have a PhD and still be profoundly deluded. Moha is a fundamental misperception of reality. It is the cognitive blindness that prevents us from seeing things as they truly are. The primary delusion is the belief in a solid, separate, and permanent I. We move through the world with the deep, unexamined assumption that there is a central me at the controls, a constant self that is the owner of our thoughts, the feeler of our feelings, and the hero of our life story. It is this mistaken identity that becomes the terrified subject of our dramas, because we believe there is a permanent me to protect we become desperate to feed it with pleasant things, loba, and defend it from unpleasant things, dosa. The delusion of a separate self is the root of our fear, because if the self is separate, it can be threatened, it can be diminished, and it can be destroyed. It is a house built on sand, and we spend our entire lives in a frantic state of anxiety, trying to shore up its fragile foundations, to see how these poisons weave together to create the fabric of our suffering. We can turn to one of the most powerful metaphors in Buddhist teaching, the story of the second arrow. Imagine you are walking through the woods and you are struck by an arrow. The physical pain is immediate and real. This is the first arrow in life. First arrows are unavoidable. We will all experience sickness, loss, disappointment, and the pain of others' actions. They are the given circumstances of a human existence. Now, a wise person simply acknowledges the pain of the first arrow. They say, "I have been struck by an arrow. This is painful. I must now tend to the wound." But an unwise person, fueled by the three poisons, immediately shoots themselves with a second arrow. Aversion, dosa, reacts with anger and fear. Why did this happen to me? I can't believe this. Greed, lobha, laments the loss of a pain-free state. I want to feel good again. I need my old life back. And all of this is driven by the delusion, moha, that you are a separate self to whom this should not be happening. Then comes the third arrow of self-pity, the fourth arrow of blaming others, the fifth of catastrophizing about the future, and so on. The wound from the first arrow might be minor, but we can bleed to death from the volley of arrows we shoot at ourselves, the call from the abyss. The dark night is often a moment when we are pierced by a first arrow, so painful that we finally notice the quiver of second arrows we are carrying on our own back. We see, perhaps for the first time, that the majority of our suffering is not inflicted by the world, but is generated by our own mind's poisoned reactions. Mapping this pain, identifying this toxic source code of greed, aversion, and delusion, is not an act of self-criticism. It is the ultimate act of self-compassion. It allows us to stop blaming the world for our wounds and begin the courageous work of putting down our own bow and arrow. Now, let us look more closely at the strongest of these poisons, the one that binds us most tightly to the wheel of suffering, the habit of grasping, the seductive trap of attachment. Of the three poisons that fuel our discontent, the one we engage with most intimately, moment by moment, is the energy of grasping. In the ancient Pali language, this is called tanha, which translates as thirst. It is the insatiable thirst of the ego to pull the world into itself, to own, to control, and to hold on. It is the engine of attachment. And attachment is the primary strategy the mind uses to try to make itself feel real and secure in a world that is fundamentally fluid and insecure. It is the spiritual equivalent of trying to build a dam made of sand in the middle of a river. It is an act of beautiful, tragic futility. It is the art of grasping at smoke. We imagine that attachment applies only to the grand things, the material possessions we accumulate, the money in our bank accounts, the titles on our business cards, but its tendrils are far more subtle, winding their way into every corner of our inner world. We are attached to our opinions. We mistake them for truths and defend them as if we were defending our very lives. We are attached to our roles: mother, father, artist, leader, victim. We cling to these labels, forgetting they are temporary costumes, and fear what we would be without them. We are deeply attached to our own stories, the narratives we have constructed about our past, our triumphs, our wounds. We replay these stories endlessly, reinforcing an identity that is nothing more than a collection of memories. And perhaps most powerfully, we are attached to our own feelings. When pleasure arises, we cling to it, desperately trying to make it stay. When pain arises, we are attached to its absence, creating a violent aversion. This constant activity of grasping, of clenching our mental fists around the fleeting phenomena of life, is the source of our deepest anxiety. For to be attached to something is to live in perpetual fear of its loss. You cannot cling to a precious vase without simultaneously living in dread of it shattering. You cannot be attached to a person's love without a low-level hum of anxiety that they might one day leave. The joy of the thing is poisoned by the fear of its absence. It makes true, spacious enjoyment impossible. It is like trying to capture a sunbeam by closing your hand around it. The moment you clench your fist, the light is gone, and all you are left with is the shadow and the tension of your own grasping. This is the central paradox of attachment. The harder we hold on to protect ourselves from the pain of loss, the more suffering we create for ourselves in the present moment through the tension of fear. The cage we build to keep happiness in becomes the very prison that suffocates it. There is no story that illustrates this profound truth more powerfully than that of a woman named Kisa Gautami. Kisa Gautami lived a life transformed by joy upon the birth of her first and only son, in a time and place where a woman's worth was often measured by her children. This small child was not just her son, he was her identity, her status, her world. She loved him with a fierce, all-consuming devotion. He was the solid ground beneath her feet. Then, one day, the child fell ill and died. The ground beneath her feet turned to dust, but Kisa Gautami could not accept it. Her grief was so absolute, her attachment so powerful, that it created a delusion. She convinced herself that her son was merely sick, and that some medicine could revive him. Cradling the tiny, lifeless body in her arms, she began to walk. She went from house to house in her village, her eyes wild with a pain no one could soothe, begging for a cure. The villagers looked at her with pity and horror. "The child is dead," they whispered. "She has lost her mind." But she would not listen. Finally, a compassionate man, seeing her unbreakable will, suggested she go and see the Buddha, the enlightened one who was teaching nearby. Clinging to this last shred of hope, she ran to him, fell at his feet, and presented the body of her son. "Master," she pleaded, "can you give me the medicine that will cure my boy?" The Buddha looked at her, not with judgment for her delusion, but with boundless compassion for her suffering. He did not tell her the child was dead. He did not lecture her on acceptance. He met her where she was. "Yes," he said gently, "I can help you, But to make the medicine, I require a special ingredient. I need you to bring me a single mustard seed." A wave of relief washed over Kisa Gotami. A mustard seed, that was easy. But, the Buddha added, the mustard seed must come from a house where no one has ever lost a child, a spouse, a parent, or a friend. Hopeful, she began her quest again. She went to the first grand house on the edge of the village. "The Buddha has sent me," she said. "I need a mustard seed to make medicine for my son. Have you any, of course?" The woman of the house replied, "We have plenty." As she was about to hand them over, Kisa Gotami remembered the condition. "One moment," she said. "Has there ever been a death in this house?" The woman's face fell. "Lady," she said softly, "you remind me of my deepest sorrow. My husband died just last year, with a heavy heart." Kisa Gotami moved to the next house, and the next, and the next. The story was the same everywhere. One family had lost a daughter, another had lost a father, another, a beloved cousin. The mustard seeds were plentiful, but a house untouched by death was nowhere to be found. As the sun began to set, she sat by the side of the road, the cold body of her son still in her arms. She looked out at the village lights flickering on, one by one, and then she had a profound realization. How selfish I have been in my grief. She thought, death is not a monster that has visited only my house. It is a law that governs all houses. It is a shadow that touches every light. In that moment, her personal, isolating agony, "My son is gone," dissolved into a universal, compassionate understanding. We all suffer loss. Her attachment, her fierce demand that her reality be the one exception to the universal law of impermanence, finally softened. She gently carried her son to the cremation ground, laid his body down, and returned to the Buddha, her hands empty, but her heart full of a terrible, liberating wisdom. "Did you bring the mustard seed?" the Buddha asked. "The work is done, Master," she replied. "I have seen the truth." Kisa Gotami's journey shows us that letting go is not an act of cold indifference. She did not stop loving her son. She stopped demanding that he be exempt from the laws of life and death. This is the crucial distinction between wholesome desire, called chanda, and toxic clinging, dönya. Chanda is the pure love she felt for her child, the natural desire for his well-being. That is not a poison. Tanha was the clinging, the attachment to his physical form, the demand that he exist forever, which fueled her delusion and her suffering. The path of wisdom is not about eradicating love or desire. It is about purifying it of clinging. It is about learning to love the world, to cherish people, to enjoy experiences fully, without the desperate need to possess them. It is to hold everything with an open hand, appreciating its beauty for the time it is there, and allowing it to leave when its time is done, without closing our fist in a futile attempt to make it stay. We are all Kisa Gotami. We are all walking through our lives carrying the corpses of our past expectations, our old identities, our demands that life conform to our wishes. The invitation of the dark night is to embark on our own journey from house to house, to truly see the universal nature of impermanence, and to find the profound peace that comes only when we finally, willingly, put our impossible burdens down. This is the beginning of true disillusionment, the necessary collapse of a world built on false promises, when we begin the courageous work of letting go. An inevitable and unsettling process begins as we loosen our grip on the people, the roles, and the expectations we have clung to for survival. The very structure of ourself begins to wobble. The identity we have so carefully constructed, brick by brick, with our achievements, our beliefs, and our stories, starts to feel hollow. The walls crack. The foundation shifts. This is the beginning of disillusionment. The word itself is beautifully precise. It means to be freed from an illusion. But when that illusion has been the only reality you have ever known, being freed from it feels less like liberation and more like a terrifying collapse. It is the heart of the dark night of the soul, the point where the old world dies, and the new one has not yet been born. To understand this collapse, we must first understand what it is that is collapsing. From a Buddhist perspective, the personality you think of as you is not a solid, enduring entity. It is a construct. It is the ego. The ego is not an enemy to be vanquished. It is a survival mechanism, a kind of psychological suit of armor that we began assembling in early childhood to navigate a complex and often threatening world. We added pieces to it with every experience. A parent's praise might have forged a piece called "I am smart." A childhood rejection might have added a piece called "I am unlovable." A career success adds the shiny breastplate of "I am a competent professional." A traumatic event adds the heavy, jagged armor of "I am a survivor." We build this suit, piece by painful piece, and we wear it for so long that we forget we are wearing it. We come to believe that we are the suit of armor. The dark night is the moment we realize this armor, which once protected us, has now become a suffocating prison. It is heavy, it is rigid, and it is preventing us from growing. The process of disillusionment is the painful, chaotic, and utterly necessary dismantling of this prison. It hurts because we are prying off pieces that have been fused to our skin. We mistake the death of the ego for our own death. But the truth is, the collapse of the prison is the liberation of the prisoner. There is perhaps no story in the spiritual canon that illustrates this violent, terrifying, and ultimately liberating collapse more profoundly than that of Angulimala. His name meant garland of fingers, for he was a feared brigand who terrorized the kingdom of Kosala, murdering travelers and wearing a necklace made from their severed fingers. But he was not born a monster. He began as a brilliant and promising student named Ahimsaka, which ironically meant the harmless one, deceived by the jealous lies of his fellow students. His own teacher, fearing Ahimsaka's prowess, devised a cruel and twisted final task to get rid of him. He commanded Ahimsaka to bring him a tribute of 1,000 human fingers from the right hands of his victims. Consumed by a desperate, misguided devotion to his guru, Ahimsaka's mind snapped. He set about his grisly task, believing it to be his sacred duty, his spiritual path. The bright student died, and Angulimala, The finger-garlanded murderer, was born. He became his new identity completely. His power, his fearsomeness, the necklace of horrors around his neck, this was his reality. His purpose, he was the unquestioned lord of his forest. One day, the Buddha, aware of Angulimala's karmic precipice, calmly and alone, began to walk down the path into that very forest. The villagers pleaded with him not to go, but the Buddha walked on. Soon, Angulimala saw him. Here was his 999th victim. He drew his sword and began to run. But a strange thing happened. Though he ran with all his might, he could not catch up to the Buddha, who continued to walk at a slow, serene pace. Exhausted, confused, and enraged, Angulimala screamed, "Stop!" Monk stopped the Buddha. Without turning, replied in a clear, calm voice that cut through the forest air, "I have stopped. Angulimala, it is you who have not stopped." In that moment, something shattered. The words made no logical sense, yet they struck Angulimala's heart with the force of a thunderbolt. What did he mean? He had stopped. The monk was still walking. He, Angulimala, was the one standing still, panting for breath. But in a flash of terrifying insight, he understood. The Buddha had stopped generating the causes of suffering. He had stopped the frantic, endless running on the wheel of violence, hatred, and delusion. It was Angulimala who was still running after victims, running from his own past, running on a path of horror that he had mistaken for fulfillment. His entire identity, the fearsome killer, the powerful lord of the forest, was revealed in that instant for what it was: a frantic, pathetic, and deeply painful illusion. The floor of his reality did not just crack, it disintegrated. This was his disillusionment. It was absolute, devastating, and the single most important moment of his life. In the dust of his collapsed world, he threw down his sword, fell to his knees, and the man who was once Ahimsaka was reborn. The story of Angulimala is our story, written in the most dramatic ink. We may not wear necklaces of fingers, but we all wear our own garlands, a garland of grievances we refuse to put down, a garland of academic achievements that defines our worth, a garland of worldly successes that we polish obsessively, a garland of our own perceived victimhood. We cling to these identities and believe they are real, that they are us. Disillusionment is the moment the Buddha's words enter our own dark forest. It is the quiet, clear voice of truth that reveals our frantic activity for the exhausting charade. It is. This shattering of our dream world is not an act of destruction. It is an act of supreme wisdom. It is the painful grace of seeing clearly for the very first time. It is the agony of a dislocated bone being snapped back into its proper socket. It hurts, but it is the beginning of all healing. Therefore, the invitation of the dark night is to do the unthinkable, to welcome the collapse, to allow the flimsy structures of our ego to fall, to let the stories we've told ourselves die, to let go of the need to be right, to be successful, to be anything at all, because only when the false scaffolding is cleared away can we begin to build a life on the solid ground of what is real. The collapse of the old self leaves us standing naked, stripped of our illusions, and face to face with a fundamental law of the universe we have spent our entire lives trying to deny, a law that Kisa Gotami had to learn through loss and Angulimala had to learn through violence. It is the truth of impermanence, having found the anchor of mindfulness, having learned to simply be present with the breath and the body. We now have a tool, a lens through which we can look more deeply into the nature of our experience. And what is the first, most fundamental truth we discover when we look without judgment, without turning away? We discover a universal, undeniable law that governs everything inside and outside of us. We discover the great dance of impermanence, the subtle and sometimes jarring truth of anicca. In the Pali language, anicca means impermanence, transience, the quality of being inconstant. It is not a grim philosophy or a depressing outlook on life. It is a simple statement of fact, as fundamental as the law of gravity. Everything changes. Nothing is permanent. Nothing lasts forever. Look closely at your own experience. Right now, the breath you just took in is already gone, replaced by an out-breath, which in turn vanishes to make way for the next. The sounds you are hearing, the very words entering your ear, they arise. They are perceived for a fleeting moment, and they dissolve back into silence. The light in your room, the temperature on your skin, the thoughts flickering through your mind, all of it is in a constant, unstoppable state of flux. We are living inside a flowing river, not a frozen photograph. This truth is not hidden from us. It is the most obvious reality of our existence. Yet we spend most of our lives pretending it isn't so. Our suffering, the deep, pervasive dissatisfaction we call dukkha, does not arise from the fact of change itself. Change is neutral. The river flows, the seasons turn, life is born and passes away. This is the natural order. The suffering arises from our resistance to this flow. It comes from our desperate attempt to build a permanent dam in the middle of a flowing river. We experience a moment of joy, a feeling of pleasure, a happy relationship, a moment of success, and immediately the mind clings. It grasps. It says, I want this to stay forever. We try to freeze the beautiful wave as it crests, terrified of it crashing onto the shore, and in that clinging, in that resistance to the wave's natural movement, we create tension, anxiety, and the inevitable pain of loss when the wave, as it must, dissolves back into the ocean. Conversely, we experience a moment of pain, a difficult emotion, a challenging situation, a period of failure, and the mind resists in the opposite direction. It pushes away. It denies. It says, I want this to go away immediately. We fight against the unpleasant. We exhaust ourselves, struggling against the current, refusing to accept that this too is part of the river's flow. This struggle, this internal war against what is the very heart of our self-created misery. We demand permanence from an impermanent world, And in doing so, we condemn ourselves to perpetual frustration. There is a profoundly moving story from the time of the Buddha that illustrates this truth with heartbreaking clarity. It is the story of a young woman named Kisa Gotami. She lived a happy life, married to a wealthy man, and she gave birth to a beautiful baby boy who became the center of her world. But one day, tragedy struck. Her young son fell ill and died. Kisa Gotami was consumed by a grief so powerful it bordered on madness. She refused to accept that her child was gone, clasping his small, lifeless body to her chest. She went from house to house in her village, desperately seeking medicine that could bring him back to life. Some people mocked her, others turned away in pity, but no one could help. She was directed to the Buddha, who was known for his great wisdom and compassion. She ran to him, laid her son at his feet, and pleaded, "Master, can you give me the medicine that will cure my boy?" The Buddha looked at her with infinite kindness, his eyes full of understanding for her pain. He did not dismiss her. Instead, he said, "Yes, I can help you, but to make the medicine, I need a special ingredient. I need you to bring me a single mustard seed, but it must be taken from a house where no one has ever lost a child, a husband, a parent, or a friend." Kisa Gotami's heart soared with hope. A mustard seed that was so simple. She immediately set off on her quest, going from door to door. At the first house, she asked, "The Buddha has sent me to fetch a mustard seed to make medicine for my son. Can you give me one?" The woman of the house replied, "Of course," and went to get it. As the woman returned, Kisa Gotami remembered the Buddha's condition. "Wei," she said, "has anyone in your family ever died?" The woman's face fell. "Oh, lady," she said, "you remind me of my deepest sorrow. The living are few, but the dead are many. My father died here last year." With a heavy heart, Kisa Gotami went to the next house, and the next, and the next. The story was the same everywhere. Every family had a mustard seed to offer, but every family had also been touched by death. One had lost a mother, another a sister, another a beloved cousin. The living were indeed few, but the dead were many. As the day wore on and the sun began to set, the truth began to dawn in her weary mind. There was no house, no family, untouched by loss. Her grief, which had felt so singular, so isolating, was in fact a universal experience. It was the shared inheritance of being human. She went to the edge of the village and watched the city lights flicker on, one by one, before being extinguished. She realized that the lives of people were just like those lights, flaring up for a moment and then dying out. Her personal tragedy was part of the vast, impersonal, and unending dance of Anika. In that moment of profound realization, her frantic clinging to her son, her desperate resistance to the truth of his death, finally softened. The tight knot of grief in her heart began to loosen. She understood. She accepted. She took her son's body to the cremation ground and let him go, not with bitterness, but with a deep, sorrowful, and peaceful understanding. She had not found the magical mustard seed she was looking for, but she had found something far more precious. She had found the wisdom of acceptance. She had stopped fighting the river. This is the freedom that embracing impermanence offers us. It is not about becoming numb or ceasing to care. Kisa Gotami's love for her son was not diminished. Her grief was not invalidated. What changed was her relationship to that grief. She stopped compounding the pain of loss with the second arrow of resistance. When we truly, deeply understand that everything is transient, our entire perspective shifts. We learn to cherish the moments of joy more fully because we know they will not last. We don't try to bottle the sunset. We simply stand in awe of its beauty. As it fades, we savor the taste of a delicious meal, the warmth of a friend's hug, the sound of laughter, knowing that these are precious, fleeting gifts. And when moments of pain and difficulty arise, we find a new kind of strength. We can meet them with courage and patience, knowing that they too will pass. The storm will eventually break. The winter will give way to spring. The dark night will end with the dawn. This is not blind hope. It is the wisdom of observing nature, both outside and inside ourselves. You can practice this right now. Pay attention to a single sensation in your body, perhaps a slight itch or a point of pressure. Don't scratch it. Don't move. Just watch it. Notice how it changes, how it intensifies, how it softens, how it might move or simply fade away on its own. It is impermanent. Do the same with an emotion. The next time a wave of sadness or frustration or even joy arises, just notice it. Acknowledge its presence without getting swept away by the story behind it. Feel its energy in your body. Watch it crest and watch it fall. You are the sky, and the emotion is just a cloud passing through. By embracing anicca, we let go of the impossible burden of trying to control the uncontrollable. We align ourselves with reality rather than fighting against it. This alignment is the beginning of true peace. It allows us to participate in the beautiful, heartbreaking, ever-changing dance of life with grace, with courage, and with an open heart. And as we look more closely at this constant flow, a new question naturally arises. If everything is changing, if my body is changing, my feelings are changing, my thoughts are changing, then what about the one who is witnessing all this change? What about the I that I believe to be so solid, so stable, so permanent? If everything is a flowing river, where is the fixed point, the unchanging self? This question leads us directly to the next great mark of existence, the most radical and liberating insight of all, the truth of anatta, of not self. We have stood at the edge of the river and watched the ceaseless flow of impermanence, of anicca. We have seen how everything we experience, every thought, every sensation, every joy and every sorrow, arises, stays for a moment and then passes away. This leads us to the most profound and perhaps most challenging question of the human journey. If everything is in flux, what about the experiencer? What about the I that seems to be standing at the center of it all? The one who is thinking, feeling, and perceiving is this self, this core of our being, the one exception to the universal law of change. The Buddha's answer to this question is both radical and deeply liberating. The answer is anatta, which translates as not self, or no self. This is not a declaration that you do not exist. It is not a plunge into nihilism. It is a gentle and powerful invitation to investigate the very nature of what you call I, and to discover that it is not what it appears to be. We live with an innate, unexamined assumption that somewhere inside this mind and body, there is a permanent, independent, and solid self, a kind of chief executive officer sitting in a control room, pulling the levers and making the decisions. We call it me, and we spend our entire lives polishing it, defending it, and promoting it. The teaching of anatta asks us to simply look for this self. Where is it? Can you find it? Let us investigate. We can start with the physical body, what in Buddhism is called rupa, or form. Is this body me or mine? It seems so at first, but this body is in a constant state of change. The cells that compose it today are not the same cells that composed it 7 years ago. It is entirely dependent on things that are not it, on the food you eat, the water you drink, the air you breathe. It gets older. It gets sick. It will one day dissolve back into the earth. If it was truly you should be able to command it perfectly, body. Do not get old. Body, do not get sick. But you cannot. This body is a temporary vessel, a biological process, not a permanent self. So perhaps the self is not the body, but our feelings, our sensations. This is the second aggregate, called Vedana. Are you your feelings? When a pleasant feeling arises, you might say, I am happy. When an unpleasant feeling arises, you say, I am sad. But feelings are like clouds in the sky. They drift in, they change shape, and they drift away. You are not the brief moment of joy, nor are you the passing storm of anger. To identify with any feeling is to build your house on a constantly shifting cloud. They are impermanent, conditioned, and not a stable self. Well then, what about our perceptions? The third aggregate, sana. This is the faculty that recognizes, names, and conceptualizes our experience. The perception of blue, the label tree, the idea of friend. Are these perceptions me? These are learned processes, conditioned by our culture, our language, and our personal history. They are mental constructs, filters through which we interpret reality. They are not a core, essential self. Let's go deeper. To the fourth aggregate, sankhara. This refers to our mental formations, our habits, our biases, our opinions, our intentions, and all the myriad activities of the mind. This is where we often feel the self resides, in our unique personality, our beliefs, our volition. But if you watch your mind closely, you will see that thoughts, for the most part, simply arise on their own. Impulses and reactions are often conditioned habits, not conscious choices. Our opinions change over time with new information. These mental activities are a flurry of transient events, a chaotic stream of causes and effects, not a single, continuous, controlling entity. And finally, there is Vijnana, consciousness, the fifth aggregate. This is the raw faculty of awareness, the knowing quality that allows us to see, hear, feel, and think. Surely this must be the self, but consciousness is not a thing. It is an activity, and it is always dependent on an object. There is seeing, but not a seer separate from the seeing. There is hearing, but not a hearer separate from the sound. Consciousness arises when an organ, like the eye, meets an object. Like a shape, it flickers on and off, moment by moment. With each new experience, it is not a continuous, independent backdrop, but another part of the changing process. A famous Buddhist text recounts a dialogue between a sage named Nagasena and a Greek king, Melinda, that perfectly illustrates this point. The king arrived to question the sage and asked him his name. The sage replied, "I am known as Nagasena, your Majesty." But this is just a designation, a name in common use. For in the ultimate sense, there is no permanent person to be found here. King Melinda, a sharp debater, was intrigued. He asked, "If there is no person, then who is it that wears these robes, who eats, who sleeps, who is speaking to me now?" He then began to deconstruct Nagasena, much like we just did. Is your hair, Nagasena? Are your nails? Nagasena is your body, your feelings, your thoughts. Nagasena, to each question, Nagasena calmly replied, "No, your Majesty." The king, triumphant, declared, "Then I cannot see who Nagasena is. Nagasena is just a sound, with no meaning." But the sage remained calm. He turned the question back on the king. "Your Majesty, you came here in a chariot. Please tell me, is the wheel the chariot? Is the axle the chariot? Is the frame or the reins the chariot?" The king had to answer no to each question. Nagasena continued, "Is the chariot then all of these parts combined? No, venerable sir. Is it something separate from all of these parts? No, venerable sir." Nagasena then delivered his conclusion. "Your Majesty, you yourself cannot find the chariot. Chariot is just a designation, a convenient name given to the collection of its parts. In the same way, Nagasena is just a convenient name for this collection of body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. In ultimate reality, there is no fixed, separate entity to be found. This insight is not meant to be frightening. It is the key that unlocks the prison of the ego. The belief in a separate, permanent self is the root cause of so much of our suffering. This phantom self is inherently insecure. It lives in a state of constant comparison, feeling pride when it is superior and envy when it is inferior. It lives in constant fear, the fear of being criticized, the fear of failing, and ultimately, the fear of its own annihilation. It draws a thick, artificial line between me and you, between mine and yours. This separation is the source of selfishness, greed, conflict, and violence. We spend our lives in the exhausting, stressful, and ultimately futile project of defending and enhancing this imaginary fortress of the self. Seeing through this illusion is liberation, when we realize there is no separate self to defend. The walls of the fortress dissolve. The fear and anxiety begin to subside. The constant need for validation fades away. What replaces it is not a void, but a profound sense of connection, of interbeing. We realize that we are not a separate wave, but a manifestation of the entire ocean. Your joy is my joy. Your suffering touches me, because the line separating us was never real to begin with. This understanding is not just an intellectual concept. It is a felt reality that can be experienced directly through mindful inquiry. When you feel anger, instead of saying, "I am angry," you can simply note, "There is anger." This creates a space. You are no longer identified with the anger. You are the space in which the anger can arise and pass away. When the relentless inner critic starts its chatter, you can see it not as your voice, but simply as thinking, another conditioned mental event passing through. This is the path to true freedom. It is the end of taking things so personally. It is the beginning of a life lived with more ease, more lightness, and more compassion. This profound wisdom of seeing through the self is the pinnacle of insight. But the path is not meant to be a cold, intellectual exercise. This clarity of the mind must be balanced by the warmth of the heart. For when we truly see our interconnectedness, when we see that there is no fundamental separation between self and other, the natural response of the heart is an unconditional, boundless love. This love, this warmth, has a name. It is called metta, or loving kindness, and it is the next step on our journey inward. Having journeyed into the profound, quiet emptiness of anatta, having seen that the solid, separate self we believe in is an illusion, a flickering mirage created by a confluence of temporary processes, we might feel a sense of vastness, but also perhaps a touch of coldness, a feeling of intellectual austerity, the insight that we are not a separate island, but an inseparable part of the entire ocean of existence, is liberating. Yet the mind alone cannot fully grasp its implications. For this truth to become a living, breathing reality, it must be felt in the heart. The heart's response to the wisdom of not self, to the realization of our deep interconnectedness, is a boundless, unconditional warmth. This warmth has a name. It is called metta, a word from the Pali language, often translated as loving kindness. It is the gentle, unwavering wish for all beings, without exception, to be happy and well. Metta is not the kind of love we so often see glorified in our culture. It is not the possessive, conditional, transactional love that says, "I will love you if you meet my needs," or "I love this person because they make me feel good." That kind of love, while beautiful in its own way, is often entangled with attachment, expectation, and fear. when the conditions change, that love can easily turn to disappointment, resentment, or indifference. Metta is something far more stable, far more expansive. It is like the light and warmth of the sun. The sun does not choose who to shine upon. It shines equally on the beautiful flower and the thorny weed, on the saint and the sinner, on the friend and the foe. It doesn't ask for anything in return. Its very nature is to radiate warmth. Metta is the cultivation of this inner sun within our own hearts. It is a quiet, powerful intention, a deep and sincere goodwill that we can learn to nurture and expand until it becomes our natural way of being in a world fraught with division, fear, and anger. Metta is the most potent antidote. It is the practice of softening the hardened borders of the heart, of breaking down the artificial walls we build between us and them. The journey of cultivating metta, like all inner journeys, begins at home. It begins with ourselves. For many of us, this is the most difficult step of all. We are so often our own harshest critics, our minds filled with a relentless inner voice of judgment and self-recrimination. We would never speak to a friend the way we often speak to ourselves. We believe that being hard on ourselves is necessary for motivation, for success. But in truth, this constant inner warfare simply creates a state of chronic stress and unhappiness. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot genuinely wish for others to be well if you do not first extend that same grace to yourself. To practice metta for yourself is a radical act of kindness. The practice is simple and gentle, finding a quiet posture. You can place a hand on your heart, feeling its warmth and steady beat, and then, silently, you repeat a few simple phrases, letting them be a soft offering to your own being. The traditional phrases are a good starting point. May I be safe. May I be healthy in body and mind. May I be peaceful and happy. May I live with ease. As you repeat these phrases, you may not feel a sudden rush of love. In fact, you might feel awkward, or your inner critic might protest, telling you that you don't deserve it. This is perfectly normal. Do not fight these feelings. Simply notice them, and with great gentleness, return to the phrases. The goal is not to force a feeling, but to plant a seed. The intention is the seed. Each time you offer yourself these wishes, you are watering that seed of kindness. You are gently challenging a lifetime of conditioning that has told you that you are not enough. You are learning to become your own ally, your own best friend. This is the essential foundation. Only from a place of inner resourcefulness and self-acceptance can we genuinely extend our hearts to others. Once you have established a baseline of kindness for yourself, you begin to gently expand the circle. First, you bring to mind a benefactor or a dear friend, someone for whom you have easy, uncomplicated feelings of love and respect. Picture them in your mind's eye, perhaps smiling, and you offer them the same wishes. May you be safe. May you be healthy in body and mind. May you be peaceful and happy. May you live with ease. Feel the natural warmth that arises as you do this. Let it fill your heart. This step helps to amplify the feeling of metta, making it more tangible. The next step is to extend this goodwill to a neutral person, This might be someone you see regularly but don't have strong feelings about, like a cashier at the grocery store, a person you pass on your daily walk, or a co-worker you don't know well. This stage is a powerful training. It challenges our tendency to live in a world of relevant and irrelevant people. It trains the heart to be open and kind, even when there is no personal benefit. Moving beyond the transactional nature of our usual relationships, you simply hold their image in your mind and offer the same phrases, extending the warmth of your heart to them. Now comes the most transformative and often most challenging part of the practice: offering metta to a difficult person. Bring to mind someone with whom you have conflict, someone who has hurt you, or whose actions you strongly disapprove of. It is crucial to understand what this step is and what it is not. It is not about condoning their harmful actions. It is not about forcing yourself to like them or pretending the hurt didn't happen. It is an act of liberation for yourself. Holding on to anger, resentment, and hatred is like holding a hot coal in your hand with the intention of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. Resentment is a prison, and metta is the key that unlocks the door from the inside. For your own peace, for your own freedom, you make the courageous effort to wish them well. You can start small, perhaps just, "May you be free from your own suffering," or "May you find peace." In doing this, you are acknowledging their humanity, recognizing that their harmful actions likely spring from their own pain and delusion. This practice cuts the chains of bitterness that bind you to them, freeing up immense energy that was being consumed by negativity. Finally, you let your heart become boundless. You allow the feeling of loving kindness to radiate out from your chest in all directions, forward, backward, to the left, to the right, above, and below. You extend it to all beings, without discrimination: friends, neutral people, and enemies, humans and animals, beings near and far, seen and unseen. You hold the entire world in your heart with the simple, powerful wish: may all beings be safe. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be peaceful and happy. May all beings be free. This is the culmination of the practice, where the illusion of a separate self dissolves into a warm, loving, interconnected whole. There is a powerful story that illustrates the sheer force of metta. The Buddha had a cousin, Devadatta, who was consumed by jealousy and tried to assassinate him multiple times. One of his plots involved getting the keepers of the royal elephants drunk and then releasing a notoriously fierce elephant named Nalagiri onto the path where the Buddha was walking. The elephant, enraged and trumpeting, charged towards him. The Buddha's disciples panicked, but he remained perfectly calm and still. He did not run or show any fear. Instead, he radiated an immense, powerful wave of pure, unconditional loving kindness towards the charging animal. The elephant, upon entering the field of the Buddha's metta, slowed down. His rage subsided. He became calm, walked peacefully up to the Buddha, and knelt before him. Hatred, in its most ferocious form, was completely subdued, not by a greater force, but by the boundless power of a loving heart. This is the potential that lies within each of us. But what happens when our metta, our wish for beings to be well, encounters the reality of their active suffering? This calls for a different, though related, quality of the heart. It calls for the courage to feel with them and the desire to act. This is the quality of karuna, or compassion, the next step in our unfolding journey. We have basked in the gentle, unconditional warmth of metta, the loving kindness that wishes for all beings to be happy. It is a beautiful, peaceful state, a sunlit field in the landscape of the heart. But what happens when we turn our attention from the wish for happiness to the stark reality of suffering? What happens when our open heart encounters not just the potential for joy, but the raw, undeniable presence of pain, loss, and sorrow in the world and in ourselves? The heart that has been softened by metta does not shut down in the face of suffering. It does not turn away. Instead, it responds with a deep, résonnant trembling. This response, this quivering of the heart in the face of pain, is the birth of karuna, or compassion. If metta is the wish for all beings to find clear skies, karuna is the courage to sit with them in the storm, and the deep desire to help them find shelter. Karuna is one of the most misunderstood and yet most essential qualities of an awakened heart. It is often confused with its poor cousins, pity and empathic distress. It is crucial to understand the difference. Pity looks down from above. It sees another's suffering and says, "Oh, you poor thing. I am so glad I am not in your position." Pity creates distance. It reinforces the ego's sense of separation and superiority. It places a wall between the observer and the one who suffers. Karuna, on the other hand, meets suffering on the same level. It arises from the profound recognition of our shared humanity, the insight of anatta that tells us we are not separate. It looks at another's pain and says, "I feel this with you. Your suffering touches me because we are connected." Pity says, "Your pain, compassion feels this pain. It is a shared resonance, an act of solidarity, not of condescension." Then there is empathic distress, which can feel like compassion but is ultimately unskillful. This is when we become so overwhelmed and consumed by another's pain that we lose our own grounding. We see someone drowning and, in our panic, we jump into the water without knowing how to swim. Now, there are two people drowning. This is often called idiot compassion. It is a heart that feels, but lacks the balance of wisdom. True karuna is not this. It is a wise heart, a brave heart. It has the courage to stay present with pain without being swept away by it. It can feel the heat of the fire without being burned. It maintains a sense of clarity and strength that allows it to act effectively. It is the one who, seeing someone in the well, does not jump in, but remains firmly on the ground, lowers a rope, and provides guidance. It is engaged, responsive, and profoundly practical. How, then, do we cultivate this wise and courageous compassion? The practice of karuna, like metta, is a gentle and systematic training of the heart. It begins, once again, with ourselves. We cannot be a source of comfort for others if we are at war with our own pain. We must learn to offer compassion to the suffering within. When you feel sadness, anxiety, or physical pain, instead of your usual habit of resisting it, ignoring it, or distracting yourself, can you turn towards it? Can you acknowledge it with a soft, gentle attention? You can place a hand over the part of your body where you feel the distress and offer it a kind whisper. I know you are there. It's okay to feel this way. May this suffering be eased. This is not an act of self-pity, but one of self-recognition. You are validating your own human experience. You are learning to hold your own pain with the tenderness you would offer a crying child. This is the foundation of self-compassion, and it gives you the inner strength to then turn towards the pain of others. From this foundation, you can begin the formal meditation. You bring to mind someone you care about who is currently suffering. Perhaps they are ill, grieving, or facing a difficult challenge. You hold them in your heart, and you allow yourself to genuinely connect with the reality of their pain. You don't need to imagine the details graphically, but simply open yourself to the truth that they are hurting. As you do this, you may feel a sympathetic resonance in your own body, a tightening in the chest, a feeling of sorrow. Let this be the trembling of your compassionate heart. Then, you formulate the sincere wish, the core intention of Karuna. May you be free from this suffering. May you find peace and healing. May your burdens be lightened. You breathe in their pain, and you breathe out this wish for their relief, this energy of peace and comfort. As you become more stable in this practice, you expand the circle. Just as you did with metta, you can bring to mind a neutral person and consider the hidden struggles they may be facing, the universal sufferings of sickness, old age, and loss that touch every life. You offer them the same wish. Then, with great courage, you can extend this compassion to a difficult person. You recognize that their harmful actions, the very things that make them difficult for you, almost always spring from their own deep well of suffering, their own ignorance, fear, and pain. You can look beyond their actions to the suffering that motivates them and wish for them to be free from that root cause. May you be free from the anger that causes you to hurt others. May you be free from the fear that makes you cruel. Again, this is not for their sake, but for yours. It is an act of profound liberation that releases you from the prison of hatred. Finally, you radiate this compassionate intention to all beings everywhere. You acknowledge the vast ocean of suffering in the world, the dukkha we explored earlier, and you hold it all in your vast, courageous heart. You become a beacon of compassionate energy, breathing in the pain of the world and breathing out a prayer for healing and release for all. May all beings be free from suffering. This is not just a passive sentiment. Karuna is the great motivator. It is the engine of compassionate action in the world. In the Mahayana tradition of Buddhism, the ideal practitioner is the bodhisattva, a being who dedicates their life to the liberation of all others. The ultimate archetype of this compassionate action is Avalokiteshvara, known as Quan the Am in Vietnam or Canon in Japan. Avalokiteshvara is often depicted with 1,000 arms, and in the palm of each hand, there is an eye. The eyes see the cries and the suffering of the world in all its forms, and the 1,000 hands are the skillful, active response, reaching out to provide whatever is needed, a hand to hold, medicine for the sick, a raft for the drowning, a word of guidance for the lost. This is not a God to be prayed to, but an image of our own deepest potential. It represents the human heart fully awakened, a heart that has united boundless compassion with profound wisdom. When Karuna is fully alive within us, we can no longer remain indifferent. It moves us to act, whether through a simple kind word, a listening ear, or dedicated work to address the systemic causes of suffering. But a life focused solely on pain, even with the best of intentions, can become heavy and lead to burnout. The heart, to remain balanced and resilient, needs another kind of nourishment. It needs to be able to recognize and celebrate the good. It needs to find joy not only in relieving suffering, but also in witnessing happiness, success, and virtue. This capacity for selfless joy, for delighting in the good fortune of others, is the next beautiful quality we must cultivate. It is called mudita, or sympathetic joy, and it is the necessary counterpart that brings lightness and balance to the compassionate heart. We have walked the path of the courageous heart, learning to meet suffering with the tender strength of karuna, or compassion. We have learned not to turn away from pain, but to allow it to touch us, motivating a deep desire to help and to heal. But a heart that is only open to suffering, no matter how noble its intention, risks becoming heavy. It can lead to burnout, sorrow, and a subtle sense of despair at the sheer scale of pain in the world. The awakened heart is not a sorrowful heart, it is a balanced heart. To balance the necessary gravity of compassion, we need to cultivate its joyful counterpart. We need to learn how to open ourselves, not just to the world's pain, but also to its vast and ever-present joy. This practice is the cultivation of mudita, which translates as sympathetic or appreciative joy. It is the ability to feel genuine, selfless happiness for the good fortune, the success, and the happiness of others. If compassion is the heart's trembling in the face of pain, mudita is the heart's celebration in the face of joy. In many ways, for those of us raised in a competitive, individualistic culture, mudita can be the most challenging of all the heart practices. From a young age, we are conditioned to compete. We are ranked in school. We compete for jobs. We vie for social status. We are taught, implicitly and explicitly, that life is a zero-sum game for me to win. Someone else must lose. Success is a limited resource, a pie with only so many slices. If someone else gets a big slice, that means there is less for me. This conditioning runs so deep that the success of others, even our friends, can trigger a subtle pang of insecurity, comparison, or envy. We scroll through social media, a curated highlight reel of other people's triumphs, their perfect vacations, their beautiful families, their career promotions, and instead of feeling happy for them, we are often left with a hollow feeling of inadequacy. We ask, Why not me? This corrosive feeling is envy, or Issa in the Pali language, and it is the direct opposite of mudita. Envy is a poison that we drink ourselves, hoping the other person will suffer. It whispers that another's light diminishes our own. It creates a world of rivalry and isolation, where we can never truly celebrate with others because their joy feels like a personal critique of our own lives. Mudita is the powerful, liberating antidote to this poison. It is the radical recognition that joy is not a limited resource. It is infinite. The happiness of another person does not take anything away from you. In fact, if you can learn to tune into it, it adds to the richness of your own experience. Mudita is the understanding that when one candle lights another, the light in the room doubles. The first candle loses nothing of its own flame. To cultivate mudita is to learn how to delight in the growing light. No matter which candle it comes from, the practice of mudita begins, as always, with a gentle and systematic approach. You start with someone whose happiness is easy for you to celebrate. Perhaps it is a beloved child taking their first steps, a close friend achieving a lifelong dream, or a student you have mentored who has gone on to do great things. You bring this person and their happy moment to mind. Visualize it clearly. See the look of joy on their face. Feel the vibrant energy of their success. Instead of letting the thought be a passing one, you intentionally savor it. Let their happiness touch your own heart. Allow a genuine smile to form on your lips. Feel the warmth, the lightness, the sense of celebration in your own body. Then, you can use phrases to amplify this feeling, offering your sincere appreciation. I am so happy for you. May your joy and your success continue. I celebrate with you. This first step reminds your heart what genuine, uncomplicated joy feels like. Next, you expand the circle to a neutral person. Perhaps you hear of a colleague's promotion, or see a stranger celebrating an anniversary in a restaurant. Your default mind might simply ignore this, filing it away as irrelevant information. The practice of mudita asks you to pause for a moment. Instead of ignoring it, you consciously acknowledge their good fortune. You can reflect, how wonderful for them. They are experiencing happiness right now. May that happiness be a source of peace for them. This is a powerful practice that breaks down the habit of indifference. It trains the heart to see the world as a place filled with countless moments of joy, most of which have nothing to do with us, and yet all of which we can choose to appreciate. The real test, the true alchemical work, is to then bring to mind someone whose success triggers envy or resentment in you. Perhaps it is a rival at work who got the position you wanted, or someone whose creative or material success makes you feel small. This is where the practice requires courage and honesty. The first step is not to force yourself to feel happy for them. That would be inauthentic. The first step is to mindfully acknowledge the feeling of envy itself. Without judgment, you simply note, there is a feeling of envy. There is a tightness in the chest. There is the thought, it's not fair. You allow the hot coal of envy to be there, but you stop clutching it so tightly. Then, you can begin to gently apply the antidote. You can try to shift your perspective. You might reflect on the hard work they put in, or the universal human desire for happiness that they share with you. You can try to find one small, genuine part of you that can be happy for them. Not as your rival, but simply as another human being who has found a moment of joy. As a fellow human, I wish you well. May this success bring you true happiness. Not just fleeting pleasure. This is difficult work. But each time you engage in it, you are loosening the grip of the ego and freeing yourself from the toxic prison of envy. The ultimate aim of mudita is to develop a heart that rejoices in the good fortune of all beings. Everywhere, when you hear good news on the television, you can feel a flicker of mudita. When you see children laughing in a park, you can share in their uncomplicated delight. You begin to realize that you have an almost infinite source of joy available to you at all times. If your happiness depends only on your own personal successes, it will be rare and fleeting. But if you can learn to be happy for the successes of your family, your friends, your community, and even people you will never meet, then you are tapping into a boundless, ever-renewing wellspring of joy. Your heart becomes a vast field that celebrates every flower that blooms. This quality of sympathetic joy is essential for a balanced spiritual life. It is the levity that keeps compassion from becoming despair. It brings a sense of gratitude and appreciation to everyday life. It fosters connection and breaks down the isolating walls of competition. But what happens to this joyful heart, this compassionate heart, this loving heart, when it is confronted with the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows of the world? Day after day, how does it remain stable? How does it love without clinging? Feel compassion without burning out? And celebrate joy without becoming giddy and attached? The heart, in all its boundless love, compassion, and joy, needs an anchor. It requires a fourth and final quality, one that holds all the others in a perfect, unshakable balance. This supreme quality is upekkha, or equanimity, the serene and spacious heart that is the culmination of our journey. We have journeyed through the radiant, outward-facing qualities of the heart. We have opened ourselves to metta, the unconditional loving kindness that wishes all beings well. We have cultivated karuna, the courageous compassion that moves towards suffering with a desire to heal. And we have discovered mudita, the selfless, appreciative joy that celebrates the good fortune of others. These three qualities, love, compassion, and joy, are like the powerful, beautiful rays of the sun, radiating out into the world. But what of the sun itself? What gives it the stability to shine continuously? What keeps it from being pulled from its course by the very planets it warms? A heart that only radiates outwards. Without a deep, stabilizing center, can become exhausted. It can become attached to those it loves, overwhelmed by the suffering it witnesses, and giddy with the joys it shares. It can be pulled back and forth by the turbulent tides of life. To bring these three boundless states into perfect, harmonious balance, we need a fourth and final quality. This quality is the anchor, the center of gravity, the calm eye of the hurricane. It is upekkha, or equanimity. Upekkha is perhaps the most sublime and most misunderstood of the four boundless states. It is not, as it may sound, a state of dull indifference, apathy, or emotional withdrawal. Indifference is a heart that has shut down, a defense mechanism against being heard. It says, "I don't care." Equanimity is a heart that is completely open. A heart so vast and spacious that it has room for everything. It is the pinnacle of caring. A love so profound that it does not get shaken. It is the quiet, unshakable balance of mind that allows us to remain centered in the midst of life's constant fluctuations. It is the ability to walk through the world with an open heart and a steady mind, meeting every experience with wisdom and peace. Life constantly assails us with what Buddhism calls the 8 worldly winds. These are the pairs of opposites that blow us off course. The highs that elate us and the lows that crush us. The first pair is praise and blame. How our ego soars when we are praised, admired, and complimented, and how it plummets when we are blamed, criticized, or are misunderstood. Equanimity sees both praise and blame for what they are: fleeting sounds, the opinions of others, impermanent and unreliable. It finds a deeper source of worth within, one that is not dependent on external validation. The second pair is success and failure, or gain and loss. We spend our lives chasing success and running from failure. Our happiness becomes contingent on achieving our goals and acquiring things. Equanimity understands the truth of impermanence. It knows that gains can turn into losses, and failures can become our greatest teachers. It allows us to strive with diligence, but to let go of the results, finding peace in the effort itself, not just the outcome. The third pair is pleasure and pain. This is the fundamental driver of so much of our behavior. The endless seeking of pleasant sensations and the desperate avoidance of unpleasant ones. We become addicted to pleasure and terrified of pain. Equanimity allows us to experience both without being their slave. It can savor pleasure without clinging to it. And it can endure pain with patience and courage, knowing that it, too, will pass. Finally, the fourth pair is fame and disrepute. We crave a good reputation and fear being seen in a bad light. Equanimity allows our sense of integrity to come from our own actions and intentions, not from the fickle court of public opinion. It is the capacity to be at peace with oneself, regardless of whether one is famous or forgotten. To stand firm in the face of these 8 winds is the mark of a truly balanced mind. This unshakable stability is not born from sheer willpower or emotional suppression. It is born from wisdom. Upekkha arises from a deep, penetrating insight into the way things truly are. It is rooted in the understanding of impermanence. Anicca, when you see, not just intellectually, but in the very fabric of your experience, that everything is constantly changing, you naturally stop clinging so tightly. Why build your house on a shifting sand dune? Why attach your happiness to a passing cloud? The understanding of impermanence creates a natural space between you and the drama of life's ups and downs. Equanimity is also born from a wise understanding of karma, the law of cause and effect. We understand that we are the owners of our actions, and that every other being is the owner of theirs. This allows us to love someone completely, to feel compassion for them, but to also respect their path. We cannot control them, nor can we protect them from the consequences of their choices. This wisdom prevents our compassion from turning into anxious meddling or burnout. We offer our help, we offer our love, and then we let go, allowing others the dignity of their own journey. Most profoundly, upekkha is rooted in the insight of not-self, anatta. When praise comes, who is being praised when blame comes? Who is being blamed a temporary collection of body, feelings, and thoughts? When we stop taking ourselves so seriously, we stop taking the worldly winds so personally. The sting of blame is lessened, and the intoxication of praise fades, because there is no solid, separate entity there to receive them. They are simply impersonal events, like the wind blowing through an empty space. Upekkha is the great harmonizer of the other three boundless states. It is what makes them wise. It transforms metta, loving kindness, from a potentially possessive attachment into a vast, unconditional love that wants others to be happy, but doesn't need them to be a certain way for us to be okay. It is the love of a grandparent, full of wisdom and space. It transforms karuna, compassion, from overwhelming grief into potent, effective action. A surgeon must have compassion to want to heal the patient, but she must also have equanimity to hold the scalpel with a steady hand. Equanimity is the steady hand that allows the compassionate heart to do its work, and it transforms mudita, sympathetic joy, from giddy excitement into a serene, stable appreciation. We can celebrate another's success without becoming attached to it or secretly wishing it were our own. There is an old story that perfectly captures this wisdom. A farmer in a village had one prized horse. One day, the horse ran away. The neighbors all came to console him, saying, "Oh, what terrible luck." The farmer simply replied, "Maybe." A week later, the horse returned, and it brought with it a herd of 12 wild horses. The neighbors rushed over to celebrate, exclaiming, "What incredible good fortune!" The farmer just shrugged and said, "Maybe." The next day, the farmer's son was trying to tame one of the wild horses when he was thrown off and broke his leg. The neighbors again came to offer their sympathy. "How awful. This is truly bad luck." The farmer replied, "Maybe." A few weeks passed, and the country went to war. Military officers came to the village to forcibly conscript all the able-bodied young men. But because the farmer's son had a broken leg, he was left behind. The neighbors all congratulated the farmer. "You are so lucky, your son was spared." The farmer looked at them, smiled gently, and said, "Maybe. This is upekkha." It is the wisdom to refrain from instantly labeling our experiences as good or bad. It is the spaciousness to allow life to unfold without demanding that it conform to our preferences. It is the profound peace that comes from resting in the center of the wheel, watching it turn, but not being spun around by it. With equanimity as our anchor, our love becomes boundless, our compassion becomes fearless, and our joy becomes limitless. We have now explored the foundational wisdom of reality and the boundless qualities of the awakened heart. With this understanding as our ground, we are ready to walk the path. We are ready to explore the comprehensive, practical, step-by-step guide that integrates all these elements into a way of life. A roadmap to liberation This map is known as the Noble Eightfold Path. Having explored the profound wisdom of reality and the boundless qualities of an awakened heart, a natural question arises. We have diagnosed the universal condition of dissatisfaction, dukkha. We have identified its root cause in our clinging and craving, dainya. We have glimpsed the possibility of freedom, the serene shore of nirvana. We have cultivated the heart's capacity for love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. But how do we weave all these threads together? How do we translate this understanding into a practical, living reality, day by day, moment by moment? What is the actual map that leads from the shore of suffering to the shore of freedom? The answer to this crucial question is the culmination of the Buddha's teaching. It is the fourth of the Four Noble Truths. It is the prescription for our disease. It is the way itself, known as the Noble Eightfold Path. This path is not a set of commandments to be blindly obeyed, nor is it a rigid dogma to be believed without question. It is a guide, a set of skills to be cultivated, a path to be walked. It is described as the middle way, a balanced and intelligent approach that avoids two unskillful extremes. The Buddha himself experienced both of these extremes in his own search for truth. First, he lived the life of a prince, surrounded by every imaginable form of sensual pleasure, a life of indulgence dedicated to satisfying every desire. He found this path to be hollow, distracting, and ultimately incapable of providing lasting happiness. It was a constant chase that only deepened the thirst it sought to quench. Then, he abandoned the palace and embraced the other extreme, that of severe asceticism. He starved his body, pushed himself to the limits of physical pain, and practiced extreme forms of self-mortification, believing that punishing the body would liberate the spirit. He found that this path, too, was a failure. It merely weakened the body and clouded the mind, making wisdom impossible to attain. Having realized the futility of both extremes, he discovered the middle way, a path of balance, wisdom, and clarity that nourishes both body and mind, leading to true insight and liberation. This middle way is the Noble Eightfold Path. It is essential to understand that this is not a linear sequence of 8 steps, where you master one before moving on to the next. That is a common misunderstanding. Instead, imagine a strong rope, the kind that can pull you from a deep abyss. This rope is woven from 8 individual strands. A single strand might be weak and easily broken, but when all 8 are woven together, they create an unbreakable strength. Each factor on the path supports, deepens, and is in turn strengthened by all the others. They are cultivated simultaneously, creating a synergistic upward spiral of transformation. To make this comprehensive path easier to understand, these 8 factors are traditionally grouped into 3 main divisions: ethical conduct, or sila, mental discipline, or samadhi, and wisdom, or panya. The first division, sila, or ethical conduct, forms the foundation of the path. It is concerned with how we conduct ourselves in the world, how we interact with others, and with life itself. It is composed of 3 factors: right speech, right action, and right livelihood. This is the ground of our practice. By committing to speak truthfully and kindly, to act in ways that do not cause harm, and to earn a living in a way that is ethical and beneficial, we create an outer environment of peace and an inner life free from the poison of remorse and guilt. A mind agitated by regret over harmful actions is like turbulent water, unable to reflect reality clearly. Sila is the practice of allowing that water to become calm and still, creating the necessary precondition for deeper contemplative work. The second division, Samadhi, or mental discipline, is the heart of the training. It is concerned with the direct cultivation and purification of the mind. Having established a foundation of ethical living, we turn our attention inward. This division includes 3 factors: right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Right effort is the intelligent and balanced energy we bring to our inner work, the wholesome desire to cultivate the good and release the unwholesome. Right mindfulness is the skill of paying attention, of being present with our experience from moment to moment without judgment. And right concentration is the ability to unify the mind, to gather its scattered energies and develop a stable, clear, and powerful focus. This is the sharpening of the tool. Sila provides the clean, stable workshop, and Samadhi forges and sharpens the instrument we will use to gain insight. The third and culminating division is Panya, or wisdom. This is the penetrating insight that cuts through all confusion and delusion to see reality as it truly is. It consists of the first 2 factors of the path, which are placed first because they provide the initial direction for our journey: right view and right intention. Right view is the conceptual map, the correct understanding of the nature of existence, such as the 4 noble truths and the principles of impermanence, suffering, and not self. It is the blueprint that guides our practice. Right intention is the conscious purification of our inner world, the deliberate cultivation of thoughts of letting go, of loving kindness, and of compassion. While this wisdom group is listed first, its full flowering is the result of the entire path. An initial, intellectual right view inspires us to undertake the practice of Sila and Samadhi. In tune, the calm mind developed through ethical living and the focused mind developed through mental discipline create the perfect conditions for right view to ripen from a mere concept into a direct, personal, and liberating experience. This path is a call to integrate spiritual practice into every single aspect of our lives. It is not something we do for an hour on a meditation cushion and then forget. Right speech transforms our conversations with our family and colleagues. Right action transforms our behavior in the marketplace and at home. Right livelihood transforms our relationship with our work, turning it from a mere means of survival into a path of service. Right mindfulness transforms the mundane act of washing the dishes into a moment of profound presence. It is a complete design for living a way of life that is beautiful, coherent, and deeply fulfilling. It is not a path of grim obligation, but one of joyous cultivation. We are not restricting ourselves, we are freeing ourselves from the chains of greed, hatred, and delusion that cause all of our suffering. The Noble Eightfold Path is the ultimate expression of empowerment. It places the keys to liberation directly into our own hands. It affirms that within each of us lies the potential for supreme wisdom and boundless compassion. And it provides us with the precise, time-tested tools to realize that potential, it is a journey we take with every step, with every word, with every breath. And so, let us begin to walk this path together, taking our first conscious step by exploring its guiding light, the very foundation of wisdom, right view. We stand at the trailhead of the Noble Eightfold Path, a comprehensive guide for living that promises to lead us from confusion to clarity, from bondage to freedom. Like any great journey, the first and most essential tool we need is a reliable map, a trustworthy compass that shows us the terrain and points us in the true direction. Without it, all our effort, all our energy and enthusiasm could be wasted, leading us in circles or into even more dangerous territory. This map, this guiding light for the entire journey, is the first factor of the path Samadhi-taught, or right view. It is placed first because our view, our understanding, our perspective determines everything that follows. It is crucial to understand from the very beginning that right view does not mean blind faith, dogma, or adherence to a fixed set of beliefs. The path of awakening is not about accepting someone else's truth. It is about discovering the truth for yourself. Right view, in its initial stages, is like being handed a reliable map of an unknown land. You don't know for certain that the map is accurate, but it was drawn by an expert traveler who has already completed the journey. You accept it as a working hypothesis, a provisional guide. You use this map to direct your steps, and as you walk the path, you begin to see that the landmarks described on the map correspond to the actual terrain you are experiencing. The intellectual understanding gradually transforms into a direct, personal, and unshakable knowing. This is the process of right view ripening from a concept into a lived reality. Right view unfolds in two main levels. The first is often called mundane or worldly right view. This is the foundational understanding of the law of karma, or karma, the universal principle of cause and effect as it relates to our intentional actions. This is the basic recognition that our actions have consequences. Wholesome actions, those motivated by kindness, generosity, and clarity, lead to happiness and peace for ourselves and others. Unwholesome actions, those motivated by greed, hatred, and confusion, lead to suffering and conflict. This is not a system of cosmic reward and punishment handed down by an external authority. It is a natural law, as impersonal as gravity. When you plant an apple seed, you get an apple tree. When you plant a seed of anger by yelling at someone, you reap a harvest of agitation, regret, and broken trust. When you plant a seed of generosity by offering your time or resources, you reap a harvest of connection, joy, and inner peace. Understanding this fundamental law of ethical cause and effect is the bedrock of a responsible and skillful life. It gives us the incentive to abandon what is harmful and to cultivate what is beneficial, providing the initial motivation for the entire path. But the path does not end with simply being a good person and creating positive karma. Its ultimate aim is liberation from the entire cycle of cause and effect. This requires a deeper, more penetrating wisdom, what is known as supramundane right view. This is the direct, experiential seeing of reality as it is, free from all our projections and delusions. The content of this liberating view is precisely what we have been exploring: a full comprehension of the Four Noble Truths and a direct insight into the three marks of existence. It is seeing for oneself that all our conditioned experiences are marked by dukkha, dissatisfaction, that the root of this dissatisfaction is tanha, clinging, that the cessation of this clinging is possible, and that the way to this cessation is the Noble Eightfold Path. It is looking at any experience, a thought, a sound, a feeling, and seeing directly its impermanent, transient nature, its anicca, and it is investigating our very sense of self and seeing its selfless, interdependent nature, its anatta. This is the wisdom that doesn't just improve our life, it transforms it at the root, cutting the very tethers of ignorance that bind us to suffering. The danger of holding a wrong view, or mikkha cannot be overstated. A wrong view is a distorted map that leads us away from freedom. For example, a nihilistic view, the belief that our actions have no real consequences, removes any basis for ethical behavior. It leads to a life of heedlessness, selfishness, and despair. If nothing matters, why be kind? Why be honest? An eternalist view, the belief in a permanent, unchanging soul or self, becomes the basis for all our clinging. Fear and egoism, it fuels our desire to protect and enhance this imaginary self, leading to endless conflict with a world that constantly challenges its permanence. There is a famous parable that illustrates the difference between our ordinary, partial views and the complete vision of right view. A king brought several men who were born blind to his courtyard. He then presented them with an elephant and asked them to describe it. The first man touched the elephant's leg and declared, "An elephant is like a great, sturdy pillar." The second man got hold of the tail and announced, "No, an elephant is like a rope with a frayed end." The third touched the ear and said, "You are both wrong. An elephant is like a large, rough fan." Another touched the trunk and insisted it was like a snake, while another felt the tusk and was certain it was like a spear. Because each man could only perceive a part, they mistook that part for the whole, and they began to argue fiercely, each convinced that his limited view was the complete truth. Right view is like being the one person in the courtyard who can see. This person sees the leg, the tail, the ear, and the trunk, but understands how they all come together to form the single reality of elephant. Right view sees the whole picture. It doesn't get caught in partial truths, but comprehends the interconnected nature of reality. This clear, holistic understanding is the leader of the entire path. It is the factor that guides and informs all the others. Because we have right view and understand the law of karma, we will naturally be inspired to practice right speech, right action, and right livelihood. Because we have right view and understand the unsatisfactory nature of our conditioned mind, we will see the necessity of cultivating right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And most immediately, once we hold this correct map in our hands, the very first aspect of our being that it seeks to align is our inner world, the source from which all our words and actions spring our intention. Right view shows us what is true. The next step is to align our will, our motivation, and our deepest aspirations with that truth. It is the pivot from seeing what is to intending to live in accordance with what is. This bridge from knowing to willing is the next factor on our path. Right intention with right view as our reliable map. We have oriented ourselves. We have a clear, conceptual understanding of the landscape of suffering and the direction of freedom, but a map, no matter how accurate, is useless if it remains rolled up in our pocket. A journey requires more than just a map. It requires the decision to walk, the will to take the first step in the indicated direction. This crucial, dynamic quality of aligning our inner world with our newfound understanding is the second factor of the path, Samasankappa, or right intention. If right view is the seeing of the mind, right intention is the aspiration of the heart. It is the rudder that steers the ship of our life, ensuring that the course set by our wisdom is the one we actually follow. Our minds are a constant, bubbling spring of thoughts, impulses, and motivations. Much of the time, this spring is murky, fed by the underground streams of our conditioned habits, our unexamined fears, and our deep-seated cravings. We react to life based on these unconscious drivers, often finding ourselves saying and doing things that lead to regret and suffering. Right intention is the noble work of purifying the water at its source. It is the conscious and deliberate process of examining the why behind our thoughts and choosing to cultivate intentions that are in harmony with our deepest desire for peace and liberation. It is about taking the reins of our inner world, shifting from being a passive reactor to a conscious creator of our own mental landscape. The Buddha, with his characteristic clarity, divided right intention into 3 distinct categories, each one standing in direct opposition to an unwholesome, suffering-producing intention. The first is the intention of renunciation, or letting go. This stands in contrast to the intention of craving and sensual desire. Our default modern existence is a relentless pursuit of more pleasure, more possessions, more status, more experiences. We are caught in a hedonic treadmill, believing that the next acquisition, the next vacation, the next relationship will finally deliver lasting happiness. The intention of renunciation is born from the wisdom of right view that sees the futility of this chase. It sees that craving is a fire that is fueled, not extinguished, by what it consumes. Renunciation is not about grim self-denial or punishing the body. It is a joyful, intelligent letting go. It is the relief of putting down a heavy, unnecessary burden. It is the conscious choice to turn away from the stressful cycle of wanting and to turn towards the peace of simplicity, contentment, and inner freedom. It is the intention to find happiness within rather than constantly seeking it without. The second is the intention of goodwill or loving kindness. This is the opposite of the intention of ill will, aversion, and hatred. How often does our mind default to irritation and anger, we get cut off in traffic. We receive a critical email. Someone disagrees with our opinion, and immediately the mind generates thoughts of resentment and hostility. We rehearse angry conversations in our heads and stew in the toxic juices of our own indignation. The intention of goodwill is the conscious decision to break this cycle. It is the practice of meeting life's frustrations with patience and understanding. It is actively cultivating a mind of friendliness, warmth, and benevolence towards all beings, including ourselves. It is the application of the heart quality of metta as a deliberate mental policy. When a thought of anger arises, we recognize it, and we gently replace it with a thought of understanding. We remember that the other person is also a complex being, likely acting from their own pain and confusion. This intention does not mean we become passive doormats. It means we refuse to poison our own minds with hatred, choosing instead the healing balm of goodwill for our own peace and freedom. The third is the intention of harmlessness, or compassion. This stands in opposition to the intention of harmfulness or cruelty. This is the active wish that no living being should suffer. It flows directly from the heart quality of karuna. This intention extends beyond just refraining from physical violence. It includes a commitment not to harm others with our words, our business practices, or our negligence, and, most intimately, it includes an intention to stop harming ourselves. Much of our inner life is filled with a subtle cruelty. The voice of the inner critic that judges and condemns us is a form of violence. The ways we push our bodies and minds past their limits out of ambition or insecurity are forms of harm. The intention of harmlessness is a commitment to pervasive gentleness. It is to move through the world and through our own inner landscape with a sensitivity that honors the preciousness of life in all its forms. Imagine your mind is a garden. For years, it has been untended. The weeds of craving, ill will, and harmfulness have grown wild, choking out the light. They grow effortlessly, without any encouragement. Right intention is the decision to become the gardener of your mind. The practice is twofold. First, with mindfulness, you learn to recognize the weeds. You see a thought of greed or jealousy as it sprouts. Second, with diligence, you gently pull that weed. You don't berate yourself for the weed's existence. You simply remove it. And in its place, you consciously plant a flower. You plant the flower of renunciation, the flower of goodwill, the flower of harmlessness. You water these skillful intentions, giving them your attention and your energy, so that over time, your inner garden transforms from a tangled thicket into a place of beauty, nourishment, and peace. This inner work is profoundly important because intention is the seed of karma. An action, in itself, is neutral. It is the intention behind the action that gives it its moral weight and determines its result. Giving a gift with the intention of manipulating someone will create a very different karmic result than giving the same gift out of pure, selfless generosity. Speaking a hard truth with the intention to hurt someone is radically different from speaking that same truth with the intention to help them. Our thoughts are not harmless, private events. They are the seeds of our future. They ripen into our words and our deeds, creating the very fabric of our reality. By purifying our intentions, we are ensuring that the seeds we sow today will ripen into a future of peace, happiness, and freedom for ourselves and for all those whose lives we touch. Once we commit to this inner purification, once we begin to cultivate a mind that intends to let go, that intends to love, that intends to cause no harm, a natural pressure begins to build. These beautiful, wholesome intentions will seek expression. They will want to overflow from the inner world of our thoughts into the shared world of our relationships. And the first and most immediate gateway through which our inner state becomes an outer reality is through the power of our speech. A purified mind naturally leads to purified words. This is the next step on our path. The crucial practice of right speech. With a mind oriented by right view and a heart guided by right intention, we are now ready to step out into the world. Our purified intentions, brimming with the desire for renunciation, goodwill, and harmlessness, naturally seek expression. The first and most powerful channel through which our inner world interacts with the outer world is through our speech. Words are not mere sounds. They are potent forms of action, capable of building palaces of trust and gardens of joy, or digging pits of despair and sowing fields of conflict. A single word can start a war or seal a peace treaty. It can shatter a heart or heal a lifetime of wounds. Recognizing this immense power, the Buddha designated the third factor of the path as samavaka, or right speech. This is the first step in the division of sila, or ethical conduct, for it is through our communication that we most frequently create the conditions for either peace or turmoil in our lives and the lives of others. Right speech is a practice of bringing mindfulness and wholesome intention to every word we utter. It is far more than simply not saying bad words. It is a subtle and comprehensive art form. The traditional teachings provide a beautifully clear and practical framework for this practice, outlining 4 specific types of speech to abandon, and by extension, 4 types to cultivate. The first is to abstain from false speech. At its most basic level, this means not telling lies. It means committing to a life of truthfulness, honesty, and integrity. When we speak truthfully, we become a reliable and trustworthy presence in the world. People know they can depend on our word, and this trust is the bedrock of all healthy relationships, from the most intimate to the most professional. But this principle goes deeper than just avoiding outright lies. It includes abstaining from exaggeration for effect, making promises we don't intend to keep, and subtly misrepresenting ourselves to gain advantage or approval. It also contains the wisdom of timing and skillful means. Being truthful does not give us a license to be cruel. Part of right speech is knowing when to speak the truth and how to frame it in a way that is gentle, constructive, and helpful, rather than needlessly hurtful. The second aspect of right speech is to abstain from slanderous or divisive speech. This is the kind of talk that sets one person against another. It is the insidious poison of gossip, backbiting, and carrying tales. When we hear something negative about one person and repeat it to another, we are planting seeds of discord. We may do it to feel important, to feel like we are in the know, or to create a false sense of intimacy with the person we are speaking to. but the result is always the same. It damages reputations, erodes trust, and destroys harmony within families, workplaces, and communities. The practice of right speech asks us to become a force for unity, not division. It means that if we cannot say something that will bring people closer together, it is better to remain silent. It is a commitment to protecting the good name of others as we would our own, and to speaking in ways that encourage reconciliation, empathy, and mutual understanding. The third component is to abstain from harsh or abusive speech. This refers to words that are intended to wound, dominate, or belittle. It includes yelling, insulting, name-calling, belittling sarcasm, and any form of verbal aggression. Harsh speech is a weapon, and it always stems from a heart filled with anger, frustration, or fear. Even if we feel justified in our anger, lashing out with cruel words only escalates conflict and inflicts deep, lasting pain. The antidote is to consciously cultivate speech that is gentle, kind, affectionate, and soothing. The Buddha described this as speech that is pleasing to the ear and endearing. This does not mean we must always speak with saccharine sweetness, but that our underlying intention should be one of respect and care. Even when we must offer criticism or deliver difficult news, we can choose words that are gentle, respectful, and aimed at building up, not tearing down. The fourth and final aspect of right speech is to abstain from idle chatter or frivolous talk. In our modern world, this may be the most challenging principle of all. We are surrounded by a culture of constant noise, pointless gossip, endless speculation, and talk that serves only to fill silence or to distract us from ourselves. This is verbal clutter that agitates the mind and cheapens the value of communication. The practice here is to cultivate speech that is meaningful, purposeful, and beneficial. Before speaking, we can ask ourselves, is what I am about to say useful? Does it lead to wisdom? Does it bring peace? Is this the right time to say it? This leads us to value our words, to use them with intention and precision. This practice also includes the profound and healing power of noble silence. In a world that is terrified of silence, we can learn to embrace it. We learn that sometimes the most eloquent, compassionate, and wise thing we can do is to not speak at all, allowing space for others to speak, for tempers to cool, or for quiet reflection to emerge. Underpinning this entire practice is the cultivation of deep listening. Right speech is impossible without right listening. So often, we listen not to understand, but only to formulate our reply. We are waiting for our turn to speak, to assert our opinion, to tell our story. Deep listening is a selfless act. It is giving the other person the gift of our full, undivided attention. It is listening not just to their words, but to the feelings and needs behind their words. When we listen in this way, our response will naturally become more compassionate, more relevant, and more healing. Think of your words as seeds. Every time you speak, you are planting a seed in the mind of another, and in your own mind, false words plant seeds of mistrust, Divisive words plant seeds of conflict. Harsh words plant seeds of fear. Idle chatter plants seeds of confusion. But when you commit to right speech, you begin to consciously sow a different kind of garden. True words plant seeds of trust. Harmonious words plant seeds of peace. Gentle words plant seeds of love. Meaningful words plant seeds of wisdom. By purifying our speech, we create an environment around us that is safe, nourishing, and beautiful. This, in turn, has a powerful calming effect on our own mind, making it even more fertile ground for the continued development of the path. Having brought our communication into harmony with our wholesome intentions, we now turn our attention from our words to our deeds, ensuring that our physical actions in the world are also a pure expression of harmlessness and wisdom. This brings us to the next factor on the path: right action. Having purified the gateway of our speech, turning our words into instruments of truth, harmony, and kindness. The path now guides us to examine a still more tangible expression of our inner world, our physical actions. While words shape the atmosphere of our lives, our actions form its very substance. They are our physical footprint on the world, the undeniable evidence of our values and intentions. The practice of bringing our bodily conduct into perfect alignment with our wisdom and compassion is the fourth factor of the path, and the second pillar of ethical conduct, sama kamanta, or right action. Right action is the practice of living our ethics. It is the commitment to move through the world in a way that is graceful, blameless, and fundamentally harmless. It flows directly from the right intention of harmlessness, or avihisa, transforming that inner aspiration into concrete, physical reality. A mind filled with wholesome intentions cannot be content if the body it inhabits is causing harm. Right action provides the clear, practical guidelines to ensure our conduct becomes a source of peace and safety for ourselves and for all beings we encounter. The traditional framework for this practice is elegantly simple and profoundly comprehensive, focusing on three fundamental areas of human behavior. The first principle of right action is to abstain from taking life at its most essential level. This is a commitment not to kill other human beings. This is the foundation of any civilized society, the baseline agreement that allows us to live together without constant fear. But the spirit of this principle extends far beyond just refraining from murder. It is an invitation to cultivate a deep and abiding reverence for life in all its forms. It asks us to recognize the spark of existence in every sentient being, from the largest animal to the smallest insect. This leads many practitioners to reflect deeply on their relationship with the animal kingdom, often leading to the adoption of a vegetarian or vegan diet as a direct expression of this principle. It is a personal choice born from the desire to minimize one's participation in the suffering of other creatures. On a subtle level, this principle infuses our entire being with a quality of gentleness. We become mindful not to swat a fly out of irritation or crush an ant without thought. This is not about becoming paralyzed by the fear of accidentally causing harm. It is about cultivating a mind that is so attuned to the preciousness of life that it naturally seeks to protect it. We cease to see the world as a mere resource for our use, and instead see it as a vibrant community of fellow beings, each with its own right to exist. This reverence for life naturally creates a peaceful and gentle presence, making us a safe harbor for those around us. The second principle of right action is to abstain from taking what is not given. This is the practice of refraining from stealing. Again, the most obvious application is clear. We do not take the physical property of others. This commitment builds a foundation of trust that allows society to function. When we respect the belongings of others, we affirm our mutual dependence and create a culture of integrity. But in our complex modern world, this principle has far-reaching implications. It means abstaining from all forms of dishonesty, such as cheating on our taxes, stealing intellectual property through plagiarism or piracy, or taking supplies from our workplace for personal use. It means not taking advantage of others' mistakes for our own gain, or using flattery and deception to acquire something we have not earned. At its core, the impulse to steal comes from a mind of poverty, a feeling of lack. It is driven by the delusion that acquiring more things will fill an inner emptiness. The antidote to this is the cultivation of contentment and generosity. When we practice being content with what we have, the frantic desire for more begins to subside. And when we practice generosity, actively giving of our time, energy, and resources without expecting anything in return, we experience a much deeper and more reliable joy than any stolen object could provide. We shift our identity from that of a taker to that of a giver, and in doing so, we discover an innate richness within ourselves that is incorruptible and boundless. The third principle of right action is to abstain from sexual misconduct. This principle asks us to bring mindfulness, respect, and harmlessness into the powerful and intimate realm of our sexuality. What constitutes misconduct is any sexual behavior that causes harm to ourselves or to others through exploitation, coercion, deception, or the betrayal of trust. In a committed relationship, this means honoring the vows of fidelity, as infidelity shatters trust and causes immense pain. More broadly, it means refraining from any sexual act that treats another person as a mere object for our gratification. It is a commitment to ensuring that our sexual expression is rooted in mutual consent, genuine écoute, and respect for the vulnerability and dignity of our partners. It means being honest about our intentions and not using our sexuality to manipulate or control others. By bringing our conduct in this area into alignment with our compassionate intentions, we protect ourselves and others from a world of hurt, jealousy, and regret, and we allow our sexuality to be an expression of genuine connection rather than mere sensual craving. These three principles, abstaining from killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, are not arbitrary rules. They are skillful means for achieving a specific and highly desirable result, a mind that is free from remorse, guilt, and fear. When we act in ways that are harmful, our minds become agitated. We are plagued by the memory of our actions and the fear of their consequences. A mind in such a turbulent state is like a shaky camera. It cannot capture a clear picture. It is incapable of the stillness and clarity required for deep meditation and liberating insight. By adhering to these principles of right action, we are creating a foundation of inner calm. We are building a life of blamelessness, a life where we can look back on our actions with a clear conscience and a peaceful heart. This inner peace is the essential groundwork for the deeper practices of mental discipline. Our ethical conduct creates the stable platform from which the rocket of our spiritual practice can safely launch, having brought our words and our physical deeds into harmony with the path. We now turn our attention to the area where most of us spend the majority of our waking hours, the area where our actions are most concentrated and have the greatest impact on the world. A significant portion of our adult lives is spent in one particular form of action, our work, and so the path now guides us to examine how we earn our living, ensuring that this, too, becomes a vehicle for our practice and a source of benefit for the world. This is the domain of the next factor, right livelihood. Having brought our individual words and deeds into alignment with a path of harmlessness, we now arrive at a domain that, for most of us, consumes the largest portion of our waking lives. Our work is not separate from our life. It is the arena where our actions are most concentrated, our interactions most frequent, and our impact on the world most tangible. It is the river into which the streams of our time, energy, and talent flow. Therefore, for our spiritual path to be truly holistic, it must encompass this vast territory. The fifth factor of the path, and the final pillar of ethical conduct, addresses this directly. It is sama ajiva, or right livelihood. Right livelihood is the application of right speech and right action to our profession. It is the conscious choice to earn our living in a way that is honorable, ethical, and fundamentally beneficial, or at the very least, not harmful to ourselves and others. In a world where work is so often seen merely as a means to an end, a way to pay the bills and fund our leisure time, right livelihood invites us to see it as an integral part of our spiritual practice. It challenges the damaging split we so often create between our work self and our real self, and asks us to bring our full integrity and presence to everything we do. The Buddha was a master of practicality, and his guidance on this topic was clear and direct. He identified 5 specific types of livelihood that are inherently unskillful because they are built upon a foundation of causing harm. These are to be avoided by anyone committed to a path of peace. The first is dealing in weapons. To manufacture or sell instruments designed for the sole purpose of killing and destruction is to profit directly from violence and fear. It is to sow the seeds of death in the world, an action that can never lead to a peaceful heart. The second is dealing in living beings, which in the Buddha's time referred primarily to the slave trade, but today can be extended to include human trafficking and the exploitation of sentient beings in any form. To treat another being as a mere commodity is a profound violation of their dignity. The third is dealing in meat, which involves the business of raising and slaughtering animals. To make one's living from the systematic killing of creatures is to be immersed in an energy of violence that inevitably hardens the heart and dulls one's sensitivity to suffering. The fourth is dealing in intoxicants, to profit from selling substances that cloud the mind, create addiction, and lead to heedlessness is to contribute to the confusion and suffering of others. In our modern context, we might expand this to include industries that knowingly profit from creating addiction, be it to gambling, social media, or other mentally unwholesome products. The fifth and final wrong livelihood is dealing in poisons, substances designed to harm or kill, While these categories may seem ancient, their underlying principle is timeless. A right livelihood is one that does not intentionally profit from the suffering, delusion, or death of any being. To engage in such work is to create a deep and painful contradiction in one's life. One cannot spend the day engaged in harmful activities and then expect to sit down on the meditation cushion in the evening and find a mind that is calm, clear, and free from guilt. Our work life and our inner life are inextricably linked. A livelihood built on harm will inevitably fill the mind with agitation and remorse, making any deep progress on the path almost impossible. But right livelihood is about much more than just avoiding what is wrong. It is about the proactive cultivation of what is right. It is about seeking ways to make our work an expression of our deepest values. This doesn't necessarily mean everyone must quit their job and become a social worker or a meditation teacher. While professions that directly help others like healthcare, education, counseling, or caring for the vulnerable are wonderful examples of right livelihood, the rightness of our work is determined as much by our attitude and conduct as it is by the job title. Any profession that does not fall into the 5 harmful categories can be transformed into right livelihood through the power of our intention and our mindfulness. A carpenter who works with care and honesty, creating sturdy, useful things for people, is practicing right livelihood. An accountant who manages finances with integrity and transparency, helping businesses function ethically, is practicing right livelihood. A software engineer who designs technology to connect people or solve genuine problems is practicing right livelihood. The key is to infuse our work with the qualities of the path. We bring right speech to our meetings and emails, right action to our business dealings, and right mindfulness to the tasks at hand. Our work becomes our practice field. When dealing with a difficult colleague or a demanding client, we have a perfect opportunity to practice patience and compassion. When faced with a stressful deadline, we can practice mindfulness of the body and breath, staying grounded instead of getting lost in anxiety. When we complete a task, we can do so with full attention and a sense of care, turning the work itself into a form of active meditation. We can reframe the purpose of our work. Instead of seeing it as just a way to get a paycheck, we can see it as our unique way of contributing to the intricate web of society. The person who cleans the office is creating a pleasant and healthy environment for others. The bus driver is safely connecting people with their families and their work. When seen through this lens of service, even the most mundane job can be imbued with a profound sense of dignity and purpose. With this, we complete our exploration of Sila, the great foundation of ethical conduct. We have put our outer life in order through right speech, right action, and right livelihood. We have created a life of blamelessness. We have woven a seamless garment of harmlessness, ensuring that our words, our deeds, and our work are no longer a source of agitation and conflict, but have become expressions of our wisdom and our kindness. Our external world is now in harmony with our deepest aspirations. We have built a clean, quiet, and stable house. The foundation is secure. Now, with our conscience clear and our heart at ease, we are ready to turn our full attention inward. We can now undertake the heart of the training, the direct cultivation of the mind itself. This brings us to the next great division of the path, samadhi, or mental discipline, beginning with the dynamic and vital energy that fuels all inner work, right effort. Having laid the great foundation of sila, or ethical conduct, our outer life is now in order through right speech, right action, and right livelihood. We have created a life of harmlessness, a sanctuary of integrity free from the inner turmoil of guilt and remorse. The waters of the mind, no longer stirred by unethical behavior, have begun to settle. The ground is now stable. With this foundation secure, we are ready to turn the full force of our attention inward, to begin the transformative work of training the mind itself. We now enter the second great division of the path, samadhi, or mental discipline. And the very first factor in this division, the engine that drives all inner development, is the vital and dynamic quality of samavayama, or right effort. The word effort can sometimes conjure images of struggle, strain, and grim-faced determination. But the rightness of right effort is precisely its wisdom, its balance, and its joyful quality. This is not the brute force of a clenched jaw and a tightened fist. It is the skillful, consistent, and patient application of energy, like a master musician tuning an instrument. It is the conscious and courageous decision to engage with our own minds, to take an active role in their cultivation, rather than remaining a passive victim of our habitual thoughts and moods. Without right effort, the entire path would remain a beautiful but unrealized theory. It is the spark that ignites the practice, the heartbeat that keeps it alive. To guide us in this, the Buddha provided a brilliantly practical and comprehensive strategy, a four-part approach to mental cultivation known as the Four Great Endeavors. This is the art and science of mental gardening. The first of these is the effort to prevent the arising of unwholesome states that have not yet arisen. This is the practice of wise prevention, of being a vigilant gatekeeper at the doors of our senses. We recognize that our mind is constantly being conditioned by what we see, hear, read, and the company we keep. If we spend our time consuming media filled with violence, outrage, and gossip, we are planting the seeds of anger and agitation in our own minds. This first effort is about guarding our attention. It is choosing to turn away from unskillful inputs and instead exposing ourselves to teachings, friendships, and environments that nourish our better nature. It is the wisdom of not walking into a swamp if we wish to keep our feet clean. The second endeavor is the effort to abandon unwholesome states that have already arisen. Despite our best efforts at prevention, the weeds of greed, anger, jealousy, and fear will inevitably sprout in our mental garden. They are deep-rooted habits. When a wave of anger or a surge of craving appears in the mind, our habitual reaction is either to indulge it, letting it sweep us away, or to violently suppress it, pretending it isn't there. Both approaches are unskillful. Right effort offers a middle way. We first mindfully acknowledge the presence of the unwholesome state, without judgment. There is anger. Then, we skillfully abandon it. This might involve applying an antidote, such as deliberately cultivating a thought of loving kindness in response to anger. It might involve investigating the thought, seeing its empty, impermanent nature. Or it might simply involve relaxing our attention from it and gently returning to the breath, letting the weed wither from a lack of fuel. This is the gentle but firm work of cleaning the garden. The third endeavor brings us to the joyful part of the practice, the effort to cultivate wholesome states that have not yet arisen. This is not just about removing the negative. It is about actively planting the positive. It is the proactive cultivation of kindness, compassion, generosity, focus, and wisdom. This is the effort we make to set aside time for formal meditation, to intentionally bring to mind gratitude for our blessings, to read inspiring texts, or to perform an act of service. It is making the first move towards the good. Left to its own devices, the mind will often follow the well-worn grooves of negativity. This third effort is the conscious act of carving new, more beautiful channels for our mental energy to flow through. It is the deliberate planting of flowers and fruit trees in our garden. The fourth and final endeavor is the effort to maintain and bring to perfection wholesome states that have already arisen when, through our practice, a moment of peace, clarity, or kindness arises. Our work is not done. The tendency of the mind is to be distracted and for that beautiful state to fade quickly. This fourth effort is about savoring, nurturing, and protecting the good that is already present. When you feel a moment of calm in your meditation, the effort is to stay with it, to allow it to deepen. When you feel a moment of genuine connection with another person, the effort is to cherish it and let it resonate within you. This is the patient, consistent watering and tending of the beautiful flowers we have planted, helping them to grow strong roots so that they eventually become the dominant landscape of our mind. The key to all four of these efforts is balance. The path is not a frantic race, nor is it a passive drift. The perfect illustration of this is the story of a monk named Sona. Sona had been a wealthy musician before joining the monastic order, and his feet were said to be so delicate that hair grew on his soles. He was extremely diligent in his practice, especially in walking meditation, but he pushed himself too hard. He walked back and forth for so long and with such intensity that his feet bled, staining the path crimson. Yet, despite his heroic effort, his mind was not finding peace. Frustrated, and began to consider giving up and returning to his old life. The Buddha, knowing what was in Sona's mind, visited him. Sona, he asked, before you became a monk, were you not skilled at playing the lute? Yes, Lord, I was, Sona replied. And what happens? Sona, if the strings of the lute are tuned too tightly, Lord, the lute will produce a sharp, unpleasant sound, and the strings are likely to break. And what happens? The Buddha continued, if the strings are tuned too loosely, Lord, the lute will produce a dull, muffled sound, and it will be impossible to play. And what if the strings are not too tight and not too loose, but are tuned to a perfect, even pitch then? Lord, Sona said, the lute will produce a beautiful, melodious, and enchanting sound. The Buddha smiled. In the very same way, Sona, Energy that is stretched too tightly leads to restlessness and anxiety, and energy that is too slack leads to laziness and dullness. Therefore, Sona, resolve on a balance of energy. Find the middle way in your effort, and your mind will find its beautiful melody. This is the essence of right effort. It is the wisdom to tune the strings of our own energy. It is the courage to engage, to try, to put our heart into the practice, and it is the patience to know when to push and when to soften. This balanced, joyful, and persistent energy is what allows us to keep walking the path. Day after day, it is the power that propels us forward, transforming our understanding into a living reality. And it is this very effort that prepares the mind for the next great factor of the path, the cornerstone of all meditative practice, the development of a stable, unwavering, and present moment awareness, the practice of right mindfulness. With the balanced and joyful energy of right effort, we have learned how to tune the instrument of our mind. We have committed to the courageous work of mental gardening, preventing the weeds of negativity, abandoning them when they arise, and actively cultivating the flowers of wholesomeness. But where, precisely, do we apply this wise energy? What is the object of our cultivation? The answer to this question lies at the very heart of Buddhist practice. It is the art and science of waking up to our own lives. It is the seventh factor of the path, and arguably the most famous samasati, or right mindfulness. In recent years, the word mindfulness has entered the global vocabulary, often presented as a technique for stress reduction or performance enhancement. While these are valid and beneficial applications, the rightness of right mindfulness, in the context of the Eightfold Path, gives it a far deeper and more profound purpose. It is not merely about being present, it is about being present with a specific, liberating intention, guided by right view. Right mindfulness is the tool we use to see for ourselves the truth of impermanence, dissatisfaction, and not self, imbued with right intention. It is a practice saturated with kindness and compassion for our own experience. It is the master skill that allows us to move from intellectually understanding the path to directly experiencing its truth in every moment. So, what is it at its core? Mindfulness is the practice of paying attention on purpose, in the present moment, without judgment. The ancient Pali word, sati, also carries the connotation of remembering or recollecting. It is the practice of remembering to come back. Again and again, the mind will wander into the past, into the future, into stories and fantasies. Mindfulness is the gentle, patient, and non-judgmental act of remembering to return to the reality of the present moment as it is. To provide a systematic training in this skill, the Buddha laid out a comprehensive framework known as the 4 foundations of mindfulness. This is a step-by-step guide to exploring the entirety of our human experience. The first foundation, and the bedrock of the entire practice, is mindfulness of the body. We begin here because the body is our most tangible anchor to the present. The mind can be anywhere, but the body is always, undeniably, here and now. The most common way to practice this is through mindfulness of breathing. We simply rest our attention on the physical sensations of the breath as it enters and leaves the body, the coolness at the tip of the nostrils, the rise and fall of the abdomen. The breath is not controlled or forced. It is simply observed. When the mind wanders, we gently and kindly guide it back to the breath. This foundation also includes being mindful of our body's posture, walking, standing, sitting, or lying down, and bringing awareness to routine activities like eating, drinking, or dressing. By grounding our awareness in the body, we pull our scattered consciousness out of the chaotic world of thought and into the calm, simple reality of our physical existence. We learn to inhabit our bodies, not just use them as vehicles for our heads. The second foundation is mindfulness of feelings or sensations. As we sit with the body, we inevitably notice that every experience has a certain feeling tone, what is called Vedana. It is either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. This is the raw data of our experience. Before we layer on our complex stories and judgments, the practice here is to simply notice these feeling tones as they arise and pass away, without reacting to them. When a pleasant feeling arises, like a sense of calm or physical comfort, we notice it without clinging to it or trying to prolong it. When an unpleasant feeling arises, like an itch, an ache, or a feeling of boredom, we notice it without pushing it away or getting lost in aversion. We watch the waves of pleasure and pain rise and fall, learning to surf them with balance rather than being tossed about by them. This practice directly confronts the root of suffering, Tanya, by training the mind to break its addictive cycle of craving for the pleasant and aversion to the unpleasant. The third foundation is mindfulness of the mind itself, also known as consciousness. Here, we turn our awareness back upon the mind that is aware. We begin to notice the overall state or color of the mind from moment to moment. We learn to see without judgment. The mind is currently experiencing desire, or the mind is currently experiencing anger. The mind is scattered. The mind is concentrated. The mind feels constricted. The mind feels spacious. We are not judging these states as good or bad. We are not identifying with them by saying, "I am angry." Instead, we are observing them as temporary mental climates. It is like looking at the sky and noticing whether it is cloudy, sunny, or stormy. This practice develops a powerful metacognitive awareness, a capacity to know the quality of our own mind, which is the first step toward transforming it. The fourth and final foundation is mindfulness of dhammas, or mental objects. This is the most wisdom-oriented aspect of the practice, where we look at our experience through the lens of the Buddha's core teachings to see how things work. We might, for example, observe our experience through the framework of the 5 hindrances, the 5 energies that block our clarity. When we feel sluggish, we can recognize this is sloth and torpor. When we feel agitated and worried, we can name it. This is restlessness and worry. By identifying these hindrances, we cease to be their victim and can begin to apply skillful remedies. Conversely, we can observe our experience through the lens of the 7 factors of enlightenment, noticing when qualities like mindfulness, investigation, energy, joy, and calm are present, and learning how to nourish them. This foundation turns our mindfulness from a simple awareness into a penetrating investigative tool, allowing us to understand the cause and effect relationships within our own mind. A beautiful way to understand the quality of right mindfulness is to imagine a wise and dedicated gatekeeper standing at the main gate of a busy, ancient city. The gatekeeper's job is not to chase after certain visitors or to fight with others. The job is simply to be aware of everyone who passes through the gate. A farmer comes through, and the gatekeeper simply notes, "Farmer, un marchand passe." And the gatekeeper notes, "Merchant, a soldier, a child, a thief." Each is noted with the same calm, impartial, and unwavering attention. The gatekeeper does not leave their post to follow the beautiful dancer into the city, nor do they get into an argument with the angry tax collector. They simply remain at the gate, fully present, aware of everything that comes and goes. This is right mindfulness. It is our capacity to remain at the gate of our senses, observing the endless parade of sights, sounds, sensations, feelings, and thoughts as they arise and pass away, without getting lost in any of them. This stable, compassionate, and non-judgmental witnessing is the art that heals. It creates a space between our awareness and our experience. And in that space lies our freedom. The consistent application of this clear seeing, guided by right effort, naturally leads the mind from a state of fragmentation to a state of unity. As the light of mindfulness shines more steadily, the scattered energies of the mind begin to gather and unify. This leads to a state of profound stillness, power, and clarity. This state is the eighth and final factor of the path, the culmination of all our mental training, right? Concentration. We have arrived at the eighth and final factor of the noble path, the culmination of the division of mental discipline. With the balanced energy of right effort, we have learned how to skillfully work with our minds. With the clear light of right mindfulness, we have learned to observe our experience with a stable, non-judgmental awareness. As we stay with this practice, something remarkable begins to happen. The scattered fragments of our attention, which are normally dispersed across countless thoughts, memories, and future plans, begin to gather. The mind, which was once like a turbulent body of water, becomes progressively more calm and clear. This process of collecting and unifying the mind, bringing it to a state of powerful, unshakable stillness, is the practice of samma samadhi, or right concentration. If right effort is the energy that propels us forward, and right mindfulness is the act of steering, then right concentration is the experience of the vehicle moving in a perfectly straight, unwavering line. It is the fruit of the preceding two factors. It is where the mind becomes so absorbed in its object of meditation that all distractions fall away. Imagine gathering the diffuse, scattered rays of the sun and focusing them through a magnifying glass onto a single point. That point becomes intensely powerful, capable of generating immense heat and light. Right. Concentration is the magnifying glass of the mind. It gathers the scattered energies of our consciousness and focuses them into a coherent, powerful beam of awareness. It is important, once again, to understand the rightness of right concentration. The ability to concentrate is, in itself, a neutral human capacity. A sniper waiting for a target possesses immense concentration. A gambler fixated on a game of cards is highly concentrated. A cat watching a mouse hole is concentrated, but this is not right concentration. Wrong concentration is fixed upon an unwholesome object or is motivated by greed, hatred, or delusion. Right concentration, as part of the noble path, is defined by two things: its wholesome quality and its liberating purpose. It is a state of deep absorption that is achieved only when the five hindrances: sensory desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry, and skeptical doubt have been temporarily subdued. The sustained practice of mindfulness and effort is what pacifies these hindrances, and in their absence, the mind naturally settles into deep, joyful states of concentration. The classical description of this deepening concentration is a progression through a series of states of meditative absorption, known as the jhanas. This journey can be thought of as a climb up a great mountain, with each jhana representing a higher, more refined state of consciousness. At the base of the mountain, our mind is scattered by the winds of the five hindrances, but as we begin to practice, we find the trail in the first jhana. Through the effort of applying and sustaining our attention on the meditation object, like the breath, we seclude ourselves from the hindrances. A profound sense of joy and happiness, born of this very seclusion, floods the mind. It is a joyful, exhilarating state, the mind delighting in its newfound freedom from its usual obsessions and agitations. As we continue to practice, our concentration becomes more effortless. In the second jhana, the initial mental effort of applying and sustaining thought falls away. The mind stays with its object without any forceful direction. The joy and happiness of the first jhana remain, but they are now deeper, born not of seclusion, but of the profound inner stillness of concentration itself. A deep sense of confidence and inner tranquility arises. The mind is like a mountain lake that is no longer fed by external streams, but is now sustained by a cool, clear spring bubbling up from its own depths. In the third jhana, the experience becomes even more subtle and serene. The energetic, almost ecstatic quality of joy begins to fade, replaced by a more pervasive and tranquil sense of profound bliss. One abides in a state of sublime contentment, fully aware and equanimous. It is like reaching a high, silent plateau on the mountain, with a vast, peaceful vista spreading out in all directions. The happiness here is not exciting, but deeply peaceful. Finally, in the fourth jhana, we reach the summit. Here, even the subtle feeling of bliss falls away. All that remains is a state of perfect, unshakable equanimity, a purity of heart and mind that is beyond pleasure and pain, joy and sorrow. The mind is utterly still, bright and powerful. It is like the air at the highest peak, perfectly clear, silent and vast. It is a mind that has been honed to a razor's edge, a tool of supreme clarity and power. But here we come to the most crucial point of all reaching this summit, is not the final goal of the path. The jhanas are not an escape from life or a heavenly bliss state in which to permanently reside. To believe so is to fall into a subtle form of spiritual bypassing. The purpose of climbing the mountain is to gain the perfect vantage point. The purpose of forging this incredibly powerful tool of concentration is to use it. The mind in the state of fourth jhana is described as being purified, bright, unblemished, rid of imperfection, malleable, vielde, steady, and attained to imperturbability. This is the mind as a perfect scientific instrument. It is the laser beam that can finally penetrate the deepest layers of reality. It is from this state of unshakable calm and clarity that the practitioner turns this powerful, concentrated awareness back onto experience itself and performs the work of insight, or vipassana. It is with this mind that one can finally see, with undeniable certainty, the truth of impermanence, the truth of suffering, and the truth of not self in all phenomena. It is this seeing that cuts the final bonds of attachment and ignorance. This is where the entire path comes together. The foundation of sila creates the blamelessness that allows the mind to settle. The energy of right effort and the awareness of right mindfulness work together to subdue the hindrances and allow right concentration to arise. And the profound stability and power of right concentration provides the ideal platform for right view to be transformed from a concept into a direct, liberating realization. Mindfulness and concentration are like the two wings of a bird. Mindfulness provides the broad, panoramic awareness, while concentration provides the focused, penetrative power. Together, they carry us to freedom. We have now traveled the full length of the Noble Eightfold Path. We have examined the wisdom that guides it, the ethical conduct that grounds it, and the mental discipline that empowers it. We have climbed the mountain and forged the instrument. There is only one question left to answer. What is the ultimate destination? What is the shore that lies beyond the great river of suffering? The shore towards which this entire path has been leading. It is time to speak of the goal itself. The final peace. The unconditioned. The deathless. It is time to speak of nirvana. We have now traveled the entire length of the Noble Eightfold Path. We began with the guiding light of right view, orienting our minds toward reality. We cultivated our hearts with right intention. We laid the great foundation of sila, purifying our speech, our actions, and our livelihood. We then turned inward, energizing our practice with right effort, developing the unwavering presence of right mindfulness, and honing our minds to a point of profound stability with right concentration. We have built the raft, piece by piece, with diligence and care. We have carried it to the edge of the great, turbulent river of samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, and suffering. Now, we stand at the water's edge and look across to the other shore. What is this destination towards which our entire journey has been aimed? What is the final fruit of this path? The answer is Nibbana, or as it is more commonly known in the West, Nirvana. Nirvana is perhaps the most famous and most misunderstood concept in all of Buddhist thought. The word itself has been co-opted to mean anything from a state of bliss to a brand of rock music. For many, it conjures images of a heavenly paradise, a beautiful garden where we go after we die if we have been good. For others, it suggests a terrifying annihilation, a complete snuffing out of existence into a black void. Right view demands that we set these misconceptions aside. Nirvana is neither a place nor is it nothingness. It is something far more subtle, profound, and immediate. The literal meaning of the word nibbana is to extinguish or to blow out. As one would blow out a candle flame, the question then becomes, what is being extinguished? The answer is simple and direct. What is extinguished are the three fires that fuel all of our suffering. The fire of greed, the fire of hatred, and the fire of delusion. Imagine your mind is in a constant state of low-grade fever, inflamed by the relentless heat of wanting more, of pushing away what you don't want, and of seeing the world through a distorted lens of confusion. This fever is the cause of all our anxiety, our stress, our dissatisfaction. Nirvana is the final and complete cooling of this fever. It is the extinguishing of the flames, leaving behind a state of perfect peace, supreme security, and unshakable freedom. It is not a place you go to. It is the state of a mind that has been completely unbound. The teachings describe two types of nirvana, which helps to clarify its nature. The first is called nirvana with remainder. This is the state achieved by an enlightened being, an arhat. While they are still alive, the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion have been completely extinguished in their heart. They no longer create any new suffering-producing karma. However, the remainder, the body and mind, the five aggregates that were produced by past karma, still exists. Such a person still experiences the world through their senses. They can feel physical pain the first arrow, but they experience no mental suffering about it. There is no second arrow of resistance, resentment, or fear. They live out the rest of their natural lifespan in a state of profound peace and selfless service, unbound by the drama of the world. The second type is parinirvana, or nirvana without remainder. This occurs at the moment of death of an enlightened being. Since the fires that fuel the process of rebirth have been extinguished, the chain of cause and effect is broken. The five aggregates, the mind-body process, dissolve completely and do not come together again in any form. What is this state? The Buddha described it as unborn, unbecome, unmade, unconditioned. It is beyond all concepts of existence and non-existence. It cannot be described, only pointed to try and grasp it with the conceptual mind is like trying to hold the sky in your hand. The ancient texts are filled with beautiful and evocative metaphors to point towards this reality that lies beyond words. It is called the other shore, a place of safety reached only by using the raft of the Eightfold Path to cross the dangerous flood of worldly existence. In a famous parable, the Buddha explains that once a wise person has used the raft to cross to the other shore, they do not then foolishly carry the raft around on their back. They leave it at the water's edge. This teaches us that even the path itself, the precious teachings, are a tool, a means to an end, not something to be clung to as a final identity. Nirvana is also called the island amidst the flood, a place of high ground that offers refuge from the swirling currents of birth and death. It is the cool cave, offering shelter from the scorching heat of the three fires. It is the ultimate security, the deathless, the supreme peace. All of this can sound very distant, very lofty, and perhaps unattainable. But the most empowering aspect of this teaching is that Nirvana is not just a far-off future goal. It has a tangible quality that can be tasted and experienced moment by moment, here and now. Every time you consciously let go of a small craving, you experience a tiny taste of Nirvana. Every time you feel a surge of anger, and instead of acting on it, you allow it to dissolve into spacious awareness, you experience the cooling of Nirvana. Every moment of true mindfulness, when the mind is free from the push and pull of desire and aversion, is a moment of being unbound. The profound peace you feel when you genuinely forgive someone who has hurt you, that release, that unburdening, is a nibbanic element. The freedom you feel when you are no longer worried about what others think of you is a taste of this supreme security. Nirvana is not a myth. It is the peace that is revealed when we stop creating the conditions for our own suffering. It is the natural state of the mind when it is no longer on fire. The entire Eightfold Path is a practical training in how to stop pouring fuel on the flames. We learn to stop feeding the fire of greed with our clinging. We learn to stop feeding the fire of hatred with our resentments. And we learn to stop feeding the fire of delusion with our ignorance. When the fuel is withdrawn, the fire naturally goes out. What is left is not a void, but a luminous, peaceful, and compassionate awareness. We have now traveled the full arc of the Buddha's teaching. We began in the forest of our own confusion, feeling the pervasive reality of suffering. We discovered that the cause of this suffering was not the world, but our own minds clinging. We learned that a cure was possible, that the fires could be extinguished. We were then given the raft, the beautiful and comprehensive Eightfold Path, and we have now explored every one of its constituent parts. We have seen how wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline work together as an integrated whole, leading us across the flood to the safety of the other shore. We have arrived. We have seen that the goal is not some otherworldly paradise, but the potential for profound peace that lies within our own hearts, waiting to be uncovered. Our journey of understanding is complete. All that remains is to take these precious teachings and weave them into the fabric of our one precious human life. Our long journey together now draws to a close. We began in a place that is familiar to so many of us, a metaphorical forest, dense with the fog of anxiety, restlessness, and a subtle but pervasive sense of dissatisfaction. Verfällt, burdened by unseen chains, running from shadows and chasing fleeting lights. On this path, we stopped running. We turned around and, with courage, we looked. We dared to name the condition of our unease. Dukkha. We looked deeper and found its root, not in the world, outside, but in the clinging and craving of our own minds. Tanya. And then, a profound hope dawned. We discovered that a path to the end of suffering exists. We began to gather our tools. We learned the liberating art of letting go, of releasing our tight grip on the past and future. We found the unwavering anchor of mindfulness, a way to be present with our own life as it unfolds. We discovered that the heart is not a fortress to be defended, but a boundless space capable of holding the world with unconditional love, compassion, joy, and a vast, unshakable equanimity. And finally, we were given the map, the Noble Eightfold Path, a complete and practical guide to weaving this wisdom into the very fabric of our being. If there is one essential truth to take with you from this entire journey, let it be this: the peace, freedom, and happiness you have been seeking are not waiting for you in some future achievement, some other place, or some other person. They are not commodities to be acquired. They are qualities of mind to be cultivated. Peace is not the absence of storms in your life. It is the presence of a steady heart in the midst of them. It is not a sheltered harbor, but a well-built ship, capable of navigating any sea with grace and courage. The frantic search for a perfect set of outer conditions will always end in disappointment, for the world is, by its very nature, impermanent and uncontrollable. The true work, the only work that yields a lasting result, is the inner work of purifying our own hearts and minds. This may sound like a momentous task, but the entire journey begins with a single, simple step. It begins with your very next breath. You have all the tools you need. You have the capacity for awareness. You have a heart that knows how to love. Do not feel that you must perfect all 8 factors of the path at once. Simply begin where you are. Bring a little more mindfulness to your morning coffee. Choose a kind word where an angry one might usually erupt. Notice the feeling of the sun on your skin. Each small moment of presence, each conscious act of kindness is a step on the path. You are the gardener of your own life. Be patient, be diligent, and be unfailingly kind to yourself as you learn to tend to your inner world. The seeds you plant today will, in time, blossom into a forest of peace. Thank you for walking this path together. May you find strength in this wisdom. May you find refuge in your own practice. And may you discover the profound peace that is your truest nature. For the path is not in the sky. The path is in the heart.